Good morning. Well, I'd like to welcome you all to the June 7th Finance and Operations Committee. We'll get going bright and early here at 7:45. We've got a lot of work to do. First thing we're going to be doing today is taking action on the President's recommended fiscal year 2019 annual operating budget. I'm just going to say a few things ahead of that. I think probably every board member may want to speak to that. I think at least a couple people have told me they'd probably make some amendments, which might be possible. And I think what we should do is eventually, I'm going to probably in a moment here ask to get the motion on the table, then we'll talk about it. And then if somebody is doing talking and wants to make an amendment, I think that's the time to do it. We'll go out of the queue and let people talk on anything appropriate to that amendment. Take care of the amendment, yay or nay, then we'll go back to the budget and go back in the queue for speaking. I think that's probably the best order. So I think the first thing we will do, maybe before we ask for a motion, is let the administration talk a little about the budget. You prefer to get on the table? Okay. We'll take. Is there a motion to adopt the President's annual recommended budget?
Mr. Chairman, I would move the President's recommended fiscal 2019 operating annual budget.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded, so we do have the motion. Now I will give the administration a chance. President Kaler, if you'd like to say any words on the budget.
Thank you, Regent Anderson. Our proposed annual budget, in this case our FY19 budget, is thoughtfully designed to efficiently support our university's 5 campus-wide noble mission of teaching, learning, research, and public outreach. And today I strongly support with no changes the entire budget as it was proposed in May, including the full set of highly interconnected resource and spending plans. As you know, part of the FY19 budget I proposed last month, my recommendation for a 2% increase in the resident undergraduate tuition rate on the Twin Cities campus. That's a reasonable and necessary increase and one I continue to support and recommend. A 2% increase is in line with or better than all relevant measures of inflation. And as I stated in a recent media report about tuition nationwide, we are in the low end of tuition increases among all public universities. If you recall, a May 9th memo from Senior Vice President Brian Burnett outlined the relevant current inflation rates, CPI, HEPI, PCE, and all are running at 2% or greater. A 2% increase amounts to $258 per student per academic year, and federal and state financial aid awards for students with the greatest financial need will more than offset that $258 increase. With such an increase, the Twin Cities resident undergraduate tuition rate will remain number 7 of 14 in the Big Ten, based on the information we have today. As you know, 61% of my solution to our budget challenge this year comes from significant internal reallocations and resource changes. Add to this the revenue from a 2% increase from Minnesota resident undergraduates, and we will be able to support only the most important investments to maintain excellence in the core of our operations. For these reasons, my recommendation for a 2% increase in the resident undergraduate tuition rate on the Twin Cities campus remains unchanged, and I stand firmly by my recommendation. The full budget recommendation will allow the university to confidently implement a balanced and sustainable budget that positions us for the future. Let me be clear. I share the goal of many state legislators and members of this board to hold down the costs of attending the university for our resident undergraduates. The fact is that together we have accomplished that goal over the past 6 years, and this recommendation for FY19 continues that commitment. In addition, we share the desire of many members of this board to control the number of positions and employees that we have at this university, and we stand ready to work with you to implement plans to control openings and refilling of positions as they occur during the fiscal year. Thank you, Regent Anderson.
Thank you, President Kaler. Senior Vice President Burnett.
Thank you, Regent Anderson, members of the committee. As you recall from our presentation in May, President Kaler's recommended increase includes, as he just pointed out, stable priorities from the prior year with an added emphasis and focus on addressing core operating needs rather than expanding scope or enhancing services. Within that context, we have worked hard to address required cost increases and operating needs with reasonable increases in tuition rates, a purposeful direction of incremental changes in other revenues to cost increases associated with generating that revenue, and continued internal reallocations to direct existing resources to areas of higher priority or need within the institution. On the spending side, our priorities center around providing a compensation plan that helps to recruit and retain talented faculty and staff, which I would submit to you are our most valuable resource of this university. Covering required cost increases with respect to infrastructure and compliance, and directing available resources to points in the budget that need assistance to maintain basic operations or areas of excellence. The details of how these pieces were incorporated can be found in the full, expansive set of docket materials, and we are happy to discuss whatever questions you have and respond during this discussion. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senior Vice President Burnett. I do know that Associate Vice President Tonneson is here if we do need to ask questions, and she'll be happy to come up and answer them specific to the budget. I guess right now I'm looking for any board member that would like to speak to the budget.
Regent Anderson, I'd like to amend. I'd like to amend the current resolution. The cost of tuition and student debt has been a major concern of mine many years before I become a regent. I was recently talking to an intern in my company who's working there this summer. He's going to be a junior in chemistry, biochemistry. He's looking at getting out of school with his bachelor's degree with $80,000 in debt, in spite of the fact that he had some scholarships in his first year, and his parents had saved for many years to help him with first-year tuition. He's still looking at getting out with $80,000 in debt. I also read where the state of Minnesota, excuse me, ranks third highest in the nation for student debt. Now, this is all MnSCU as well, but third highest in the nation for students holding debt. 70% of students getting out with an undergrad degree have debt, and fifth with the amount of debt, over $31,000 in debt. Since 2001 to 2016, the cost to attend the university rose over 26%. The cost of higher education rose faster than the growth of wages for people graduating from college. Purdue, I just read an article where Purdue had a 7-year freeze. And the undergraduate application, graduate rates, and other key indicators have risen as a result of that. So I'm very much in favor of proposing a 1% decrease for Minnesota residents in tuition.
And you're making that as a motion?
Make that as a motion.
Is there a second to the motion of a 1% decrease in Minnesota undergraduate tuition?
Second.
Second? It's a second. Motion's been moved and seconded. Do we have other members that would like to discuss that, or Regent Simonson, would you like the floor to make more of a point, or Regent Sviggum?
Mr. Chairman, if I could, just a clarification, as my ears are not working right. Was Regent Simonson motion, was that to reduce the President's recommended 2% to 1%, or to reduce the
tuition as he is by 1%?
The latter.
Yes, yes. And I know one of the, can I comment? I know one of the issues becomes quality. And in my company, if I asked one of my department heads to reduce their cost, I know they would find ways without reducing quality. And so I don't think that needs to be a major issue right now in this. And the other question always comes up, well, where's it going to come from? Well, President Kaler put out an email a week or so ago that talked about if it was a freeze, he found where there'd be about $6 million that he could reduce it. The cost of this 1% would be about $9.1 million. So we're looking for about $3 million more than that. Or looking at, my advice is look at central administration and find that money. I think it's possible, and I think we don't have to reduce the quality. And I think it's the other thing is, I know we rank, I think the President said something like 7th in the Big Ten. I don't want to be in the middle. I want to be better.
Okay, so just to, I got you one moment, Regent Amar. Just to be clear, we're asking for a 1% reduction of today's tuition for next year, not 1% off the 2%. That's undergraduate tuition. It's been seconded by Regent Hsu. Regent Amar.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. More clarifying questions. System-wide, are we talking about NR, and resident? Lots of questions and clarity around exactly what we're talking about.
I believe the motion, and Regent Simonson can concur with this, is for 1% Twin Cities campus only.
No.
Whole system, I understand.
Whole system, undergrad, residents.
Okay. Point taken.
Mr. Chairman?
Regent Johnson.
Mr. Chairman, I strongly oppose this amendment. Number one, Regent Simonson, I do not think your facts are correct. The presentations we have had, undergraduates from the University of Minnesota, and if I'm wrong, please correct me, Senior Vice President Burnett or President Kaler, 52% graduate without debt. Of the remaining with debt, I believe that number is $26,000 or $27,000. And you said that number was higher. Second of all, to begin to reduce the potential revenue to the university, and especially at Crookston, Morris, Duluth, simply is not very timely in my thought as we move forward. So members of the board, I would ask you to oppose this amendment of a 1% reduction.
Thank you, Regent Johnson. Any other discussion specific to the motion? President Kaler.
Point of clarification following Regent Johnson's comments. It's 43% of our Twin Cities graduates graduate debt-free. The average debt is about $25,000. The cost of attendance is roughly $28,000. So to accumulate $83,000 in debt, a student essentially has to have no income, no parental support, and live lavishly. So your intern is living the high life, Regent Simonson.
And you add to that, Mr. President.
Simonson.
Oh, I'm sorry. You add to that the cost of interest to pay that debt off over the years, about 7%. It goes up significantly.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion to the motion of lowering undergraduate tuition at all system campuses?
Mr. Chair.
Regent Rocha.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, a clarification. Regent Johnson raised an interesting point. The way that we have the budget structured now, the campuses are relying on the tuition drawn by the campuses, as I understand it. So my question for Regent Simonson is, or to Vice President Burnett, how would this work as far as ensuring that the system campuses are held harmless? I mean, you know, where from would this then have the central budget providing additional funds to the system campuses to ensure that they're not suffering from a lower threshold of revenue on the campuses?
Regent Rocha, is that question, I think, to Vice President Burnett, do you have an answer to that?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Regent Rocha, we attribute all the tuition earned on the campuses to that campus. So this would be a revenue decline projected to the 4 system campuses, and we'd have to take a look whether there was funds to backfill that from Central. There's no new state money. So that would mean you would be either taking money from the Twin Cities campus and moving it out to the 4 system campuses. And also this would be going 2% in the other direction, because in the President's budget recommendation, Morris had asked for a 1% increase. So 1% down would be about a 2% gap from their spending plan. So I don't know of any resources available to backfill that on the system campuses should a reduction in tuition rates take place.
Student Representative Preston, you had a...
Yes, Chair Anderson. We are always excited when there's another student regent appointed to the board who's going to advocate for issues like this, because this is a conversation that needs to be had. When will there come a time within the history of this university when we actually have a conversation of when we can actually decrease tuition for students? And I don't know if today is the day where we have that conversation. Maybe this is the beginning of that conversation. But I mean, this is something that's very, I think, it makes me very hopeful because this is a conversation that has to be had. I think the debt load on the next generation of citizens in our state, leaders in our community, there comes a point where this debt load becomes unsustainable and you simply can't realize your potential, the potential this university provides you opportunity for if you are having to spend the next however many decades paying off this debt. I would like to offer as well that if there was ever a tuition decrease for students, that it not just be for residents, but for all of our students, including non-residents as well. So thank you, Regent.
Regent Simonson, you have one more.
Yeah, I have one more comment in response to Senior Vice President Burnett. What we're talking about here is slightly over $9 million out of a $4 billion budget. I can't help but think the administration can find that room.
Thank you. Regent Chu.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. I think some of the statistics that have been thrown out are incorrect. I don't want to delve into that right now, but I do believe that this is a great time to discuss this because we've had this discussion for a couple of years now, and we haven't really had an opportunity to look for efficiencies, other efficiencies in the university beyond the operational excellence plan. But I think there is opportunity. It's not huge money, obviously. Anybody can do the math and figure out that it's well less than 1% of the total budget. I also believe that, and I don't know when we're going to have this discussion, but as you know, we started having the law school discussion last month. I've done further analysis on information that we've received, and there's a significant amount of money going into law school, $40 million to date, to be fairly precise, which is the number I used last month. I checked it, it's correct. If we approve the President's budget with the 2% increase on resident tuition and the 1% increase for Morris, we're looking at spending another $11 million on the law school this next year, and then it goes up from there, and then we'll repeat the recurring revenue increase in allocation will be close to $12 million a year after that, after 2021. So if you look at the 10-year cost of subsidizing the law school, you're looking at close to $100 million. Now that's real money. $9 million, maybe not so much, but $100 million, and then if you go out the next decade, $12 million a year, that's $120 million. So 20-year cost of subsidy to the law school will be $220 million. And that's if we don't increase along the way. So I really think that there is an opportunity to have these discussions. Now, there are other schools that probably need money, and we have to look at that. We're kind of in the middle of a strategic planning process right now, which I had hoped that would have been complete by the time we discussed this budget, but it didn't happen. So I think there's plenty of money to be found in Central. And to answer Senior Vice President Burnett, Central Reserves, we already take money out of Central Reserves for this and that. And if we had to go to Central Reserves, I think that would be appropriate because we already transfer, I don't know the exact number, but maybe $9 million from Central Reserves to fund an O&M increase anyway, and we do that every year. I don't have the precise number, maybe someone else does, but I do think that there's an opportunity to freeze or even go lower. So I'm supporting this at minus 1%, and I think the money can be found, and if it can't be found out of central administration, which I think it can, Central Reserves can the draw out of Central Reserves can be increased to support that.
Thank you, Regent Roller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sorry for skipping.
Oh, no, you didn't. I just wanted to give Regent Simonson a chance to respond to my question in concert, but that's all happened now, so we're good. First, I want to speak to Representative Preston's comments. I strongly associate myself with most of them. The final comment, and I appreciate that in the current environment where a very high percentage of the people involved in student government come from outside of Minnesota, that I would expect the advocacy for the NRNR, and I respect that. But fundamentally, my perspective is NRNR is market-based Minnesota students. It's access, which is how all of their states treat Minnesota students when they seek to enroll there. But I am very encouraged to hear that students want to have this conversation, because this is the 30th anniversary of me sitting in the seat that you're sitting in, and I've had a chance to watch what's happened to the cost of college and the cost for undergrads at the University of Minnesota over that period. I'm going to support the amendment with all of its challenges, and here is why. I was disappointed. We could be talking about a freeze, but I actually think the 1% reduction takes us closer to where we really ought to be historically. But the options that we received for the freeze, I didn't find to be particularly salient. In fact, I found them to be somewhat akin to a levy referendum for a school district saying we're going to cut all your arts and all your sports and make it as painful as we possibly can unless you pass this referendum. And so and for the administration, I think, to put these very precise concepts where you're attacking CEHD or CFANS or Duluth into that package ultimately invites the board to look at every line item in the budget and say, well, wait a minute, let me take out my scalpel and tell you this is where I would make cuts, because certainly nobody at this board wants to see teaching or research damaged in any way through our budget process. Over my 30-year history as a student advocate, as a representative, and as someone who just cares deeply about access to public education as opposed to our private counterparts, I have seen two things grow dramatically at the university. One is tuition, the other is the cost of administration. And when we look at the cost of tuition, if our benchmark is 6 years ago, I think we've done pretty well, right? We've held the line. The legislature has stepped in there. The board has stepped in, and the president has been an advocate for holding the line on tuition where we have that capacity. But I don't think that's the right benchmark. I think the benchmark is let's say 1990. Where's tuition compared to 1990? I know where two things are. I know where tuition is, and I know where the cost of administration is. And I don't think that that's reasonable. And I understand that this is a national trend. I would like to see us be a leader with respect to this in this area. And I would hope that other institutions that are similarly situated, and having a chance to speak with some trustees at other peer institutions, I think that there is a desire to head in this direction overall. I'm concerned about President Kaler's comment about this particular individual and living the high life. I think that if you take just the basic tuition rate, multiply it times 4, you're saying this person should be living on $4,000 a year. And as life happens, I think it's very, very simple very easy for 4 years to cost well in excess of $100,000. And so I would be surprised if we couldn't walk out the doors of this building during school and find, hundreds of people within a stone's throw that would suggest that they have that kind of challenge and they're not living the high life, but I could be wrong. In any case, I would, if this passes and if this becomes part of the budget, I believe that we would have work cut out for us to identify how we can find the savings in a way that does not affect teaching and does not affect research. And when you consider the percentages, as described by my new colleague to my left, the amount of money that we're talking about is a very, very small percentage of the overall expenditure. There have been leaders of this board who have talked about wanting to move in this direction. And we are now starting to get to a point where we can have the conversation that Representative Preston identified in saying, what is our commitment to bending the cost curve so that we can bend the tuition curve even more dramatically. We are 40% higher than 4 Big Ten schools who are equivalently ranked or better ranked than the university within the Big Ten. So clearly others have found a way of keeping that level of access while maintaining quality. This will conclude my remarks with respect to this particular item, but I'm going to support this with the expectation that we are able to identify means of those savings. I do think that it's remarkable that when we talk about a $9 million line item, we act as though we're going to bring the university to its knees, but when we want to change a few personnel over at Bierman Hall, we find $8 million in a heartbeat. I don't think that this is really a credible argument that we can't find this money, and I would ask my colleagues to support this as a means of starting to change the way we do business. Thank you.
Thank you, Regent Rocha. Regent Beeson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I do want to thank the administration and the staff and Ms. Tonneson, Mr. Burnett for the work on the budget. I think the level of detail and explanation and connectedness that it provides is really the best that I think this is my 10th budget that I've seen, and I think it connects a lot of dots in terms of really understanding the staff's thought process behind it. The budget itself, I think this is another year of, demonstrating financial stewardship. On average, the increases, we have bent the cost curve, so 1% over the last 7 years under President Kaler's leadership, I think is quite respectable. And I think responding to Regent Powell's early commitment when he joined the board about trying to keep this under the cost of living, I think that this does that. In fact, former Regent Broad always used to talk about, she'd see the budget and then she would say, well, what's your actual spend rate? And I think the expenditure rate is 1.8%, so it's lower than the actual tuition rate. And that leads me to the point that we are a public institution. We deserve to have state operating support. So we need to call that out. It's our responsibility to say we need our share of the state pie. Our spend rate is lower than transportation, it's lower than health care, it's lower than almost any area of the state. State spending, city spending, county spending is in excess of our spending. So we actually are the most cost efficient in terms of expenditure increases than other units of government. If we step back from the numbers for a minute, there is this national narrative about tuition, and we all get caught in it. And it's a tough. This industry is in really serious shape, institutional-wise and individual student-wise, and both of those are concerning. But our job is to think about this institution. I think we have an opportunity to go deeper into investments where all our metrics are that we're strong. Our financial leverage is good. Our brand is great. Student debt is going down. I would, if I had my druthers, increase the amount of capital spending with this institution and really take advantage of the retrenchment that other states have seen. We could elevate our medical school with a little bit more investment. We could advance that. We could create more research. So I think if we're thinking like a big business, they would say, that CEO of that business would say, you've got an opportunity to sort of advance this university through really strategic investment growth. The amount of investment we're talking about here is pretty thin. Pretty thin. So we are we're just named 35th out of the top 1,000 universities in the world. I think the strategy should be around how we advance ourselves up from 35th. We're not going to do it entirely through cost reduction. Thank you.
Thank you. Regent Omari.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. Are we taking this opportunity to comment on the overall budget, or do you want us to stick to the amendment and then
My personal perception is we actually started talking about an amendment, but we're really talking about the overall budget. I think people are saying what they want to say, and once we quit talking, we will take a vote on the amendment,
right,
and then we'll have maybe some time to go back to the original budget.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. So I'll start talking overall budget a little bit and then get into some of the amendment, and just start that with saying that these are tough conversations, but I like them. Tough because we don't want to sacrifice quality, we don't want to sacrifice access, and tough because there's a burden that goes to students, and as someone who finished a PhD 3 years ago, I feel that. Luckily, I was able to finish a PhD with no debt from working several jobs and support from the institution. So I'm happy to see the increase for our people, because we need to pay our people and we need to pay quality. So I'm glad that there's a 2% bump for our folks. I read the comments that were in the docket materials that folks submitted from across the community and the system. And I want to make one thing clear, because there was an obvious misperception that there's a part in this budget where we will be approving the non-resident, non-reciprocity tuition. That was approved in December by, I think, a 9-3 vote. So if anyone made a comment in there that assumes that this is also approving that, that's already been approved. So I want to make that very clear, that this budget today in this conversation is not in lieu of, or is not included in that. So one thing that I want to offer, if I can, to the Senior Vice President or the President, is, given the data and the numbers that Regent Hsu just presented about the law school, what is the, I mean, are those, I don't want to call your math skills into question, Regent Hsu. Are these accurate numbers? Do you know if these numbers, are they misinterpreted for some reason? So on and so forth. I would love a response on those numbers. And then number two, I'd love to come back to Regent Hsu, and I want to understand the piece that Regent Simonson came to, is where's the money going to come from? So are you suggesting that we no longer take central money to the law school and just let it go wherever it goes and whatever happens with the market? Are you suggesting that we take, a large chunk of it from central reserves and pay for the $9 million? And then I'll close with, I 100% agree with Regent Rocha on the models that came through for how we would freeze or do a 1% or a 1.5%. I was thoroughly disappointed in those models that we saw. I thought that they were going to be more robust, and was hoping for more of a spread of how we might be able to gather those finances. And President Kaler had some light to it yesterday on the telephone, but I still wanted to see a bit more than that. So there it is.
So, Regent Omari, I heard a little bit about the law school there, a little about question for Regent Simonson. If I may, I think there may be an amendment to our budget coming for the law school. I've been approached by a regent about that. My suggestion to that regent was wait until we get everything else done and put it in this, because I think once I've seen, or at least know a little about that amendment, I think it won't matter if we ask for a 5% decrease or a 5% increase, that amendment might be able to come at that time. So I think we will see something on the law school today here before we actually vote. And so if you'll be patient with me. The second question, I think, was to Regent Simonson. Regent Simonson, did you want to briefly answer where you'll come up with the money? Is that the... It
was not.
Okay, not to Regent Simonson. Okay, thank you.
It was concerning the numbers that Regent Hsu presented about the law school for the Senior Vice President, and then to Regent Hsu, what is his solution? Okay,
so do you want to answer the law school, or are you okay waiting till we get to that discussion?
I can just, for clarification.
Okay, for clarification.
As I heard Regent Hsu talk about the investment in the law school, I think you multiplied it over 10 years and then a 20-year period, if I heard you correctly.
I didn't multiply.
You said over 20 years, as
right.
I understood it.
Right.
I think you have to put that into context in a $4 billion budget. that over 20 years, this institution as a whole will spend $80 billion plus or minus. So the investment rolled over 20 years is a percentage of the entire institution. I think you have to put that into context. The other thing that we've shown in many, many data requests that we fielded in the last month on the law school is that at one time this institution did invest heavier in O&M when the law school, and then the market came down. As we put in Amendment 5 in the budget, in Appendix 5, we talked about this national phenomena. The dean was here, the provost was here. We spent a great deal of time digging into that, and they were swept up with forces that were beyond really the borders of Minnesota or beyond their control. So the question is, do we help them come back with discipline while we maintain one of our top programs in this institution as a top 20 law school? And so I think our recommendation wasn't to solve it overnight. It was to make a step in the direction with some caveats about how we get there. But I think if you took any of our expenditures and multiplied them over 20 years, you would have a big number.
Thank you. Regent Shu, did you want to say anything? I just remind you that I've got 2 more speakers on this amendment. Then we'll get a yay or nay on that and move on.
Well, thank you, Chair Anderson. I can respond to those questions. So if I add up all of these subsidies given to the law school since 2014, which is when it started, the number today is around $40 million. If we approve the increases in the current budget, FY19, at the end of next year, it'll be $51 million. And then if you go forward with the proposal that is in this year's docket, or in this docket today, we will be up in the $97 million range by the end of 2023. So, you know, yes, we can multiply these numbers and we will get big numbers, but my point is, if I came to you and said that is it worth $100 million to maintain the ranking of the law school instead of going out and getting more students and having them pay tuition? You know, that's the real decision that we've been slowly making over the last 4 or 5 years, even before I came on the board, based on incremental increases that look small today, but they grow and they're magnified by the fact that the yearly or the annual recurring allocations will continue on forever. And if we haven't had a discussion about, is that really where we want to put the resources of this institution? Now, I can tell you, at doing a little bit more research, the University of Michigan, the number 8th rated law school in the country, the highest rated public law school in the country, only has a budget of $45 million this year. Our budget is right around there, but we're educating only about 600 and change students, and they have close to 1,000. So what we're essentially doing by putting these allocations in here is to support the tuition for students that we're buying, mostly from out of state, to come here. In fact, our in-state population in the law school is about 1/3 of the 600 or so. So the other 400 or so students, they're getting a really good deal to come here, and I don't know that we can make the argument that they're all going to stay here and join our legal community. And even if they did, I'm not sure that it would be worth the expenditure in relation to what we're spending, or what we could be spending in some of the other colleges. The medical school comes to mind as one where the ranking is now 46. I know we're doing things to try and fix that, but at the same time, when I see a big number, over a 10-year period of $100 million, that I think should force us all to stop and think about what we're doing and where that money's going, and is that the best place for that money to go? Because we have finite resources. Now the state government, I think, has been generous to us. I think we know that we get more than twice as much money as the University of Michigan does from the state of Michigan. So we're trying to fix the non-resident tuition problem, which has been too low for too long. And I think there are places, now to answer Regent Omari's question, there are places to get that money. If you can't get it from internal savings, from central administration, for example, I did find the central reserves number. This year we're taking $5.7 million out of central reserves. There's a lot more money in central reserves, obviously, and we're doing well in the market in terms of, that's where most of our investment, or that's where our investment income goes. And, so I think there are some opportunities. If you can't get the savings, central reserves has it. We do take it every year and we move it to O&M. And that O&M money then gets distributed to the colleges in various ways that we haven't really talked about. But in this case, we're being asked to approve another increase to the law school. And that's where if if we just look at it every year, we're not going to see it. But if you go back and look at what we've done over the last 5 years, it's $40 million.
Thank you, Regent Hsu. I've got Student Representative Anderson, then we'll take the vote.
I have two comments, and I think both are very important and both reflect some of the student body. The first is the part of me that's been working 70-hour work weeks to try to dig out after the school year is saying, in a university that pushes for excellence for students, I don't think that an undergrad degree is all many of students are wanting to do. Many of my cohort want to go on afterwards, and even with the average debt of, I think it was $26,000, I don't think that sets us up for very much success. On the other hand, as a student who's currently applying to medical school, I regretfully say that the U of M is not in my running because it is not where I believe my education would be best fostered, and I think it's behind, and a 2% increase maybe would help. So those two sides of me sort of are hard to balance sometimes, but I will do whatever it takes to have an amazing medical education, and I think the U maybe isn't where I want it to be.
Student Representative Anderson, I'm just going to say that I share your stuff. I get on a teeter-totter on cost versus future benefit to students. Regent Sviggum, is your question, I'll go to you in the queue next if it's not to this amendment. If it's this amendment, I'll go to you right now, otherwise we'll get the vote behind us.
It would be to this amendment.
Okay, Regent Sviggum. Regent Sviggum.
And first of all, I should, if I remember the discussion well from last meeting in the last month, we've taken care of the law school subsidy with the futuristic McMillan-Rocha grant that is doing. So I think that was mentioned, and I know it has, maybe the check hasn't been written yet, but it's in the mail. It's more of an IOU, I think. Members, we all have very strong feelings about this, and I really appreciate Regent Simonson jumping right into the fray. I think that is awesome. I commend you for that, Regent Simonson. I'm a patient person, very patient person, and while I like your amendment, I wonder if we can't force the administration to make your amendment more real maybe next year in the budget than right now. I'm somewhat concerned about not knowing where the dollars are coming from. Somewhat concerned about what part of the mission isn't going to be met, where the actions will be taken to reduce. I think I agree with many of the members here that there's some administration costs that can be maybe reduced and some staffing costs, but I'd like to know them a little more specifically. And I think patiently we could address this in a more real manner for a reduction even next year if we knew exactly we could control those dollars. I speak to the chairman, and he talks to me about risk, risk from the legislature, right, or risk of the economy, and I agree. I understand the risk is there, and I speak to the president, and he talks to me about the value of the education, and I agree. And I actually think it's a good value. The tuition we pay for what students receive, I actually think it's a good value. That doesn't mean it couldn't be a better value. My only concern is I wish I knew every choice has a consequence. Every choice. You're making a choice. I wish I knew what the consequence was before I made that choice, and I'm not exactly sure what the consequence is, so I'm apprehensive over supporting the amendment right now, even though I think Regent Simonson is helping us bend the curve towards controlling costs.
Thank you, Regent Sviggum.
Can I make one more comment?
Very briefly, and we'll go to the vote.
Very briefly. I'm interested in the statistics people are throwing out here. I've got another document here that says in 2016, over 60% of our undergraduates got out with debt, and so I'm hearing all kinds of numbers on that. But I know one thing for sure, the cost of higher education is increasing faster than the growth of wages for people with degrees, and that's a major concern for me. And I read a quote someplace where it's a metaphor, a butcher metaphor, the fat's in the marble. As I look at this $4 billion budget, I think there's marble in there that can find $9 million.
Thank you, Regent Simonson. Okay, let's get to this. We spent, and I'll stay here all day. I mean, this is important stuff, the budget, but we've had one amendment and we spent 45 minutes, and I think we should get the amendment either up or down so we know which way we are going, because it'll make a consequence, as you say, one way or the other. So at this time, I'm going to call for the vote. The amendment in principle is basically a 1% decrease in in-state undergraduate tuition on all campuses from the 2018 tuition rate. Correct, Regent Simonson?
Yes.
And that has been seconded. And so at this time, if you vote A, you're voting for that. If you vote nay, you're voting against it. So all those in favor of a 1% decrease in Minnesota resident undergraduate tuition system-wide signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
Motion does not pass. Motion fails. So now we're on with the budget. Is there any, Regent Powell?
Thank you, Chair Anderson. I also want to thank the administration for the process this year, which I think was a very good process. I particularly want to thank Vice President Burnett for his availability to Regents as we went through this. I also want to agree with, just state that I agree with the priorities around preserving the competitiveness of our salary structure and our research program. Having said all of that, I just want to hit on my colleagues. I think the 2% is too high, and so I'm very concerned about it. We're throwing around a lot of inflation numbers. The one that I focus on, personal consumption index. I mean, I think it's 1.8. So we can throw numbers at each other all day, but it's below 2. But I think more importantly than that, after 6 or 7 years of very low inflation. So it starts to get close to 2, and we're almost signaling that, gosh, and it's back, so we can start to pull the tuition lever a little harder, and I'm very concerned about that, and also, I think, so whoever just made the comment, we're not seeing wage growth take off either. So I don't really think that the average family is flush with cash here. So I'm very concerned about the 2%, and maybe the most concerning of all for me is I just don't think that 2% is a sustainable kind of rate of increase. I worry that if we do 2% now, we'll come back next year and say, well, we did it a year ago. 3 or 4 years down the track, this place is going to be $800 or $900 more expensive each year, and I'm very, very. I just think that's going to be a bad place for us to be. So I would offer to amend the president's budget. I would propose a 1% increase in tuition. I just don't think we're in a 2% era. I think we're in a 1% area, so I propose 1%. So I would propose that along with that sort of a balanced revenue approach, a little bit from tuition through additional students and modest increases, continued focus on cost management, increased support from our endowment, which is growing. I think through those 3 buckets we could find a way to go from 2 to 1, and I think that 1 is a much better place to be in this economy and these consumers. So and this is applying to the Twin Cities campus only. So that would be a proposed amendment to the president's budget.
So the amendment as I see it, because some of it is wording, but the real amendment where it sticks to the budget is a 1% increase in tuition over the 2018 tuition on the Twin Cities campus alone.
That's correct, Chair Anderson. Thank you.
Undergraduate, excuse me.
Yes, undergraduate.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. So now we've got another amendment on the table. It's been seconded. Let's talk about that. Is there any discussion on that? Regent McMillan.
Thank you, Chair Anderson, and thank you, Regent Powell, for that articulate perspective. I have two comments, one directly in response to what you just said. I agree that 2% is not sustainable over the long haul. You'll see me support 2% at some point today, but it is not sustainable, and we cannot launch onto a path where it's 2%, 2%, 2%. That even no matter what happens to inflation, we can't go there. So that's my perspective on that, but I want to pick up on a theme that Regent Beeson mentioned a minute ago and you just did, and that is this is my 8th budget, and it is a night and day difference from what we originally saw in terms of depth of analysis, the detail, the supporting documentation, and the ability of any regent who wants to get into, analyze, dissect, consider, and then work with. So that comment comes in the form of a thank you to Vice Presidents Tonneson and Burnett and President Kaler. That's been a long process. The Regent Beeson started some time ago, and I've tried to drive forward, and many of us on the board have, to back up this budgeting discussion into the discussion in September and October about levers, drivers, and ultimately getting to a point where we have now had in front of us a considerable amount of detail and a considerable amount of time to think this thing through. So just a general commentary to President Kaler and his team about the quality of what we have to work with here. Thank you.
Thank you, Regent McMillan. President Kaler.
Just as a point of clarification, in fact, the data from the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta shows that wage growth was the lowest in recent memory in 2010 at just under 2% a year. Current wage growth in the United States is about 3.4% on an annual basis.
Appreciate the perspective. Regent Omari.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. The sustainability is a great point, one that we have to be paying very close attention to, and one that I would suggest we should be paying very close attention to with non-resident non-reciprocity as well. It doesn't seem to my recollection that folks were talking about the sustainability of a 15% when we approved that. So we should be thinking about that in both realms, and no matter what happens, we should be seeing how this impacts the students and access and so on and so forth. And then Regent Powell, could you just mention the 3 buckets that you said again that you think we can garner this money from, please?
Regent Powell.
Thanks, Chair Anderson, Regent Omari. Yeah. So I think as we go forward, we need to look at a balanced approach to managing our cost increases. I am willing to go to the tuition bucket. I think there are 2 ways to strengthen tuition revenue. One is more students, and I think we have a number of places where we would love to see more students and the income that they bring, coupled with very modest increases in tuition. And so my marker is 1%. The second bucket is the President and his team over the last 7 years have worked hard to find administrative cost efficiencies. As I've said many times, that needs to be an ongoing, never-ending process, and so we're going to need to continue to, as a board and as an administration, focus on finding additional efficiencies. I just don't see any way we can escape that. And finally, I think that as we continue to grow and strengthen our endowment, I think that the opportunity there is to look for increases in operating support from the endowment as it grows bigger. The team here does an outstanding job of managing the asset values of the endowment. Really, really good. I think as a board, regardless of this conversation, I think we need to look at a future meeting at in totality the way the endowment is managed, including what assumptions we should be making about growth in support from the endowment over time. To my knowledge, we haven't had that conversation in a while. So those are the 3 buckets. Regent Omari, thank you. Thank you.
And I will say I visited with Regent Powell yesterday, and we had a discussion about, shortly before he got on the board, I think we adopted a student increase plan here on our system. But both Regent Powell and I were kind of surprised that it's only 1,000 students on the Twin Cities campus. Regent Beeson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is really a crux conversation about going forward. What rate of increase, if any, we're willing to have. But it's so fundamental to all this. So our predecessors put in place increases annually of 10 to 15%. pretty inelastic sort of, but we are the beneficiaries of this. Everything around this university is a result of smart investment of those dollars. We enjoy it. The university is now stronger in every measure, academically, financially, campus-wide. So our predecessors made those decisions to invest, and for us to sort of seal in a sort of 1% or 0%, I think we are committing the university into really a status quo. We're saying with that kind of sort of preface that we are not able or willing to accelerate the university into going from 35th on the worldwide university or at the 8th public research. I just think that's a really restrictive sort of approach. And I'm not willing to sacrifice wages. They are low, but 2% wages is not paying too much, and I would have a problem going less than 2% with any of our staff, faculty down to the maintenance people. Thank you.
Thank you, Regent Beeson. Regent Rocha.
To the comments?
Oh, excuse me, President Kaler, I did not see you.
No, it's not directly to Regent Beeson's point, so please.
Go ahead, Regent Rocha.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Regent Powell also, was that in response to Regent Beeson?
Yeah, go.
I'm sorry, I didn't see you.
No, please, Regent Rocha.
First, a clarification. The amendment is to the tuition increase.
Yeah.
Not reducing the compensation rate.
If I may, Chair Anderson.
Yeah,
thanks, Regent Rocha. Yeah. So as I said quickly, in my preface, I fully agree with the approach of maintaining competitiveness of salaries, and I think the benchmark is 2% roughly in the budgets. I support that, and I think protecting competitiveness of salary and faculty salary is really critical. So I'm not arguing for cutting it.
Thank you, Regent Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This conversation is fascinating to me because of being picked up out of a completely different time when we literally had a rule that any Minnesota student with a high school diploma would be admitted to the University of Minnesota. To a point now where we're talking about, sort of running with the wolves of the top-ranked schools, and that has become our priority, and sort of uber alles. And I'm trying to sort of reconcile this concept that the university has a duty to educate the people of this state, and all of the things that come along with that. Specifically to the point of the amendment, I support the amendment. Obviously, it is a subset of the ranges that I would find better than the current proposal of 2%. And the reason that I think that we're in this conversation right now is this is the only chance we have to impact the principles of where this is going. We're in a strategic planning conversation. We're not yet at the level of detail to talk about these components. What is our general methodology as it relates to the cost of attendance for the people that support the university through the state of Minnesota. I would note, in I think pretty clear relation to what Regent Beeson is saying, one of the public institutions that is among the 7 above us in the ranking that we're celebrating currently is Wisconsin, and yet Wisconsin's tuition for an in-state student is under $11,000, substantially less than ours. So they clearly have found a way to deliver that level of excellence and quality without making it as difficult for our students. I do want to make a quick comment with respect to the student debt. The debt numbers that we continue to throw around are just simply not credible. There are so many different types of debt, whether it's a second mortgage for parents or whether it's private loans and so on. They're not reflected in these numbers. And I think that what Regent Simonson was identifying is probably more indicative of what a lot of people face when they're done here than would be some very precise and sort of cherry-picked data saying, well, of this specific kind of debt, these students don't have debt. I just don't find that to be credible, and I really wish we would stop doing that and start talking about the principle of doing all we can to make it affordable while being excellent. That seems to be the basic principle we should be operating under. With respect to Regent McMillan's comments, I understand that, and I've observed during my redux period here that the level of detail and the level of analysis is substantially better. We can now look at it and we understand a lot more. There's still some areas, and I'll talk to this to the main motion here shortly, but some areas where we are not nearly where we ought to be for an institution of this size and an administration of this talent. But with respect to that data, I don't want to rest on just being able to say we now know what's there. Now we need to start acting on it and start moving things in the right direction. Maybe I'm not as patient as my colleague Regent Sviggum, but this is an opportunity for us to start moving in this direction and establishing these principles, because I think the students, current and future students of the University of Minnesota, deserve that, and so I'm going to support the amendment.
Thank you. Okay, I've got 2 more speakers on this, and then we're going to take a vote on this amendment. President Keller, did you have something you wanted to say? Or
not relevant.
I've got 1 more speaker. Regent Beeson, you asked for.
Oh, yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. In response to a couple comments about our competitors and how they're able to produce 0% increases or lower tuition, both Wisconsin and Purdue and probably Illinois have a much higher percentage of out-of-state students. In fact, Illinois and Purdue are really financing this through international students. So we want to go to those models. It's a pretty easy way to balance the books. But I don't think anybody here has got an appetite for reducing the percentage of Minnesota students in our undergraduate programs. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, very brief, Regent Hsu.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Anderson. Well, in response to the discussion about the number of students, I think it's been clear for several years now that we actually do have more space on campus for students in particular programs and colleges. And it's our desire to maintain a 28 ACT that's keeping them out. Well, that's revenue that is lost if we continue to go that route, and I hope we can have that discussion again in the near future, because every student on campus is an increase in revenue.
Thank you, Regent Hsu. So the Powell Amendment, again to paraphrase it, it's a 1% increase in Twin Cities campus undergraduate Minnesota resident tuition over the 2018 tuition. So at this time, I'm going to ask all those in favor of going 1% on the Twin Cities campus signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Let's have a show of hands, if I may. All those in favor, please raise your hands. 4, 5. All those opposed, raise your hand. 7. So the motion is denied. We're on to the general motion about the President's budget. Regent Sviggum.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment too. I think Maggie would have a copy of it.
I believe Ms. Flatten has a copy she can pass around.
And very quickly, members, I'll speak to it as it's being passed around. I think it is an amendment to support both the Powell and the Simonson amendments, but do it in a way that we'll be able to prepare for those reductions in tuition and reconcile our budget. Members, as we all know, our most valuable asset is our personnel, our people. We also know that 64% of our budget, total budget, goes to support our people, our staff that provide services at the university. That number has grown to 26,900, as I understand, over the last year, an increase of 500 people. Some of them in very sensitive areas, but still increased rather significantly. I think in order for us to at least bend the curve of tuition, we have to address costs first. So, members, I have come upon this proposal to you. It's kind of in a narrative form, so, Mr. Chairman, I'm not exactly sure how it works in the resolution because it's in a narrative form. I've tried to work with the chair. I've tried to work with a couple of the regents. Certainly tried to work with CFO Burnett on this concept. And the concept is basically this. Take just the O&M funds, which is tuition or money we get from the legislature, positions funded by those funds, not by grants that come in or any other form of dollars, just O&M funds, that those positions would, through attrition over the next year, or it could be 2 years or 3 years, this is just for the next year, through attrition, so no one loses their job. We don't go to anybody and say you don't have a job tomorrow. We don't eliminate a position for a person currently working at the university. To put in an additional level of review for rehiring of positions that are in the O&M area. And that would be, by the way, we did this at the legislature at one time, and it worked. And now the numbers are much less, much less as far as the number of people. But I think it could be done without much cumbersome activity. And the idea is that over the next year, if there be a retirement, if somebody leaves service here at the university, if someone happens to pass away, before that position be rehired, that CFO Burnett would have to give just a quick blanket approval to the hiring of the position. And the provost. And the provost. And the provost. It's just an additional level of review that I think will help us significantly maybe reduce our personnel costs here at the university, at least have an additional level of review through negotiations, and not negotiate, through compromise discussions. I am not putting in any type of a goal for a number, 2% or 5% or any type of reduction. Just an additional level of review that I think, if Mr. Burnett handles it the way I think he will help us reduce our costs in our most sensitive and greatest area of cost at the university, and provide for us the opportunity to support all of us, the Powell and the Simonson motions, in a patient another year.
Thank you, Regent Sviggum. And that is in the form of a motion?
I'll make it a motion, yes.
Do we have a second, and we'll talk about it?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded, and I do know that you've been crafting this, and I knew it was coming, and that's one of the reasons I let discussion go on other things, because it actually pertained to this motion. I mean, all that discussion was good for these type of things. I'm going to ask first President Kaler and then Senior Vice President Burnett to maybe explain this a little bit in their language, how they see it, and then I think we can limit discussion to 4 or 5 minutes and vote it up or down. And in my opinion, we got a lot more to work on. So President Kaler, do you have any discussion about this?
Thank you, Regent Anderson. We support this idea. This additional structure will actually be helpful to us. In an institution, you can budget money or you can budget positions. We historically have budgeted money and let there be some discretion at an individual unit level about position filling when someone retires at a high salary. If you save money by hiring 2 people at lower salaries, we've let that go. That has a tail to it, of course, as those individuals age in place. And this additional level, I think, is prudent. We've been thinking about a similar sort of structure, and we support the creation of this level of review.
Senior Vice President, do you have any?
Nothing to add to it.
Okay. I will just say from my study of this, we have about a 10 to 12% attrition rate a year. So it'll affect 10 to 12% that want to leave. Regent Beeson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Regent Sviggum. I'm inclined to support it. There is a cost to administering this, but it doesn't appear to be unmanageable. I would be interested to know through this process what those savings would be generated out of this. How many denials, how many approvals, so if we could incorporate that into, let's see what this looks like after a year, and have the administration report back to us a year from now and see how this approach works.
Vice President Burnett has an answer.
Regent Beeson, the language actually talks about us reporting in 6 months in the last sentence, so we were going to do it both mid-year and at the end of the year. So we concur and are happy to bring you what results look like from this effort.
Mr. Chairman?
Comment back, Mr. Chair. I would suggest a year. I don't think it's going to, the data will be conclusive in 6 months. I would propose a year from the board.
Regent Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Regent Swigum, process question. Have you offered this as an amendment language or a rider that we used to talk about in former days, or an understanding from administration? What's the process? Or simply enter it into the record and the administration will carry forward?
Yeah,
Regent Swigum.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Johnson, I wish I had the direct answer to that. I would consider this to be a rider that we would add in a bill at the legislature just to address the process. I'd like to have something formal in our plan, something that we can respond to. I would certainly, stepping back, accept the Regent Beeson's friendly amendment that this be a yearly review rather than every 6 months. I would like to incorporate that, Mr. Chairman.
Let's ask for it. So you're seconding his amendment? So now
I'm incorporating it.
Incorporating it. Okay, well, I think we have to second it so it's a year instead of 6 months.
I think if the author agrees and accepts it, incorporates it, I don't think we need to.
So then we're okay. If somebody says I'm wrong on that, but my legislative guys here say we're right on that. So the actual amendment now is for a year.
Yeah. As far as a review,
I believe this would be an amendment to the budget, is what Ms. Flatten is telling me, is what it would be, an amendment to the budget. Regent Omari had a question.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Regent Swigum. I think this is a solid idea and way to move forward. I also think that we're at the line where we're staying in governance, but very close to the line of going past governance. And so I appreciate the thoughtfulness behind not crossing that line, and then caution board members to say that we're at the line. So making sure that we're paying attention to where that gray line of governance and management is, and that next year, looking at this, we want to be mindful of that and not going further past the line, or at least having a discussion of where that line is. In my mind, we're at the line. So I'm supporting.
And Regent Beeson, and then we'll vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think Regent Omari makes a good point. This probably belongs somewhere in the progress card versus a standalone resolution, so that we gear up the review of the progress card. If the board feels that the account about employees is that critical, maybe we talk about putting it in there in some form.
Regent Hsu.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. I support the amendment or motion, whatever it is. But I do think that we need to have a report before we approve another budget. So less than a year, I think, is important. Maybe 11 months, so that we see it in by the May meeting.
So will somebody give me guidance on what is the wording on this friendly amendment we want for the timing?
Before fiscal year end.
By the fiscal year end, does that work?
Just before.
Before the fiscal year end, okay. So the bottom line instead of through the year and at fiscal year end, it'll say before fiscal year end. Is that okay? So that is what we're going to be voting on. President Kaler.
Regent Anderson, may I offer perhaps a simplification that the administration report to the board in their May 2019 meeting on progress on position control?
Right. Is that easier in your opinion, President Kaler?
My opinion, yes, sir.
So the May 2019 report. So, and now we'll read. They will offer the report at the May 2019 board. Regent Rosha.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In trying to kind of wrap my head around what's happening with this as a rider to the budget, or as a policy in the budget, or as a policy, and is it a Regents policy or an administrative policy? But the one thing that I want to make clear is, and you know, the timing of it I think is a bit challenging, because if we're getting it in May, it's not really going to inform our budgeting process next year, but maybe we're starting a cycle that will take us farther, and maybe the progress card is a better location for that. I just want to make sure that this doesn't end up being a substitute for a clear analysis of the overall structure and the positions that we have, and how we most effectively support the teaching and research and outreach, overall. So just that's my cautionary tale, that we don't come back and say, well, we've got this new rule in here, but I think there's value in this data, so I'll support it. I'm still a little bit off balance on how it plays within this, but I think the point's been made. The administration seems to have embraced this, if not led the charge on this, and so I'll support it. But as we go forward, we'll continue a more in-depth process of addressing some of these other issues. Thanks.
Thank you, Regent Rocha. We're going to take a vote on this amendment now, which is before you, and the report is to come May 2019. I understand that this is an amendment to the budget. Correct, Ms. Lapp? To the main motion on the budget. And so all those in favor of the amendment in front of you about, I would call it employee attrition, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. So we are on to the main budget with a employee attrition addendum, if you will. And we've got 15 or 20 minutes, and I'd like talk on the main budget here, and then I know we're going to have something on the law school real brief, but Regent McMillan.
Well, I'm prepared to bring forward the discussion about the law school specifically, but
let's bring that forward now, and any other items can come with that.
Very good. And while that's getting handed out, some draft language for a resolution, let me provide context. At the May meeting, I was, I think, quite clear in my commentary that the law school is very important to me personally, and it's important to the university and the state and the country, but we can't continue subsidizing. I think a better word is the board can evaluate when that investment needs to end. And I support the investment that's embodied in this budget, which I believe is $1.9 million for this fiscal year, and I do not support years 2 and 3, which I think are 1.7 and 1.4. I may be off a little bit there, but there's 3 successive years here, and what I have provided here in the form of, again, an amendment, Chair Anderson, to the budget would be guidance to the administration to come up with some metrics around which they can evaluate and then recommend to us so we can evaluate whether or not to continue this investment in years 2 and 3. And mindful of Regent Omari's very excellent commentary about when we dip below or into the management side of the spectrum that is governance on one end and management on the other, I don't presume to understand what the right metrics are, and I would look to the law school and to President Kaler and Senior Vice President Burnett and Provost Hanson to come up with those. Paragraph 2 of this it throws out some ideas. That's all they are. I don't know what the right metrics are, but those could be part of it. They might not. Paragraph 3 says that would require the administration to come back to us with that set of metrics by September of 2018, and then have a report on that in February of 2019 for us to evaluate those year 2 and 3 investments. And I recognize there's members of the board who don't support even the current investment, and my position, I hope, is clear to all my colleagues. That is that we can't continue this much longer. It's extremely expensive for the rest of the university, but we've made the investment to date, and I don't want to just pull up and throw it in the ditch at this point. I would like to see us move forward in a more disciplined and structured manner. So I offer the amendment before you and would look for debate.
Is there a second? Okay, thank you, Regent Omari. So really what I see here is I see that another amendment to the budget, which says we are funding the law school to this budget year, but unless they meet some metrics, or we want them to prove some metrics before we fund them in the 2020 budget. That is the scope of your motion, Regent McMillan?
Yes.
Okay, so to that point, I'm going to take questions in just a moment, but I'm going to let President Kaler speak.
Regent Anderson, again, for the record, we support this. I think, as Regent Omari pointed out, this perhaps is in a different way at the line, maybe slightly peering over the line of governance, but that's okay. I think for the board to reemphasize the importance of meeting the mark for our law school actually amplifies our voices, the provost, the senior vice president, and my voice as we provide direction to the law school. So I would encourage passage of this resolution by the board.
Okay, and I'm going to call on people that want to talk, but I'm going to ask you keep it to one point and be brief because we are running up against time. Although, like I say, if we want to keep going, I will keep going. I'll just give you a break. Regent Beeson, did you want to speak to this amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to really commend Chair McMillan for how he's handled this. He's elevated the issue. He requested a plan, and with a plan in place, he's put some guardrails around developing metrics going forward and for having a closer review. This school is symbolically one of our most important areas of academic endeavor, and maybe next to the medical school. So it's symbolic, and it drives business in our community. So I'm glad we are spending the attention that we are. It is expensive. I totally agree with you. We can't go unabated in the future. Thank you.
Regent Omari, did you have a question, or were you just motioning?
Well, I did motion, but I'll just say quickly. I think the line of governance also is one where you ask the question of importance, right? And so this is important. So I actually disagree with the president and say we're not overstepping that yet because there's a level of importance where we as fiduciaries need to step in. And then lastly, I'll just say, Michigan is not a fair comparison. I hate to say it, but they are not our peer. They're just not. They're an aspiration. And so at the same time, in that vein, as we talk about Michigan, I do think this plan will either be able to allow us to try and chase Michigan or then admit, as I've already done, that they're not our peer. They're a public-private school, let's be honest.
Thank you, Regent Omari. Regent Rocha.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And of course, Regent Omari has to throw me off my game by attacking my alma mater. I would suggest that the University of Minnesota Law School and its graduates are absolutely peers of those that come out of Michigan, but certainly the reputation challenge is one that is significant, and Michigan enjoys a reputation on a range of things, but if you really dig down into the data, you'll see that I think we stack up very well. I really appreciate Regent McMillan bringing this forward. I didn't know that this was coming until just recently, but one of the challenges I had in looking at the budget was knowing to what extent was this committing us to a strategy that we really hadn't fully discussed. And I really do think that there's a governance component here that validates this analysis, because I think that a lot of us are concerned about not just this particular school, but how do we deal with schools that run into these kinds of challenges, and how are we going to do that going forward, and how does that impact the rest of the budgetary considerations. I would just say I'm very interested in understanding what the principles are for going forward. We hear about the change. I had a wonderful conversation, by the way, with the dean at commencement, and I think gave me some more context to some of the things that the school is facing right now. But it does beg the question. The market fell out, but it didn't fall out just for our law school. It fell out for all law schools. And so, to sort of suggest that we don't have some capacity to impact our circumstance, I think that's defeatist, and I don't subscribe to that. But the other part of it is our standard, we're only going to admit students of a certain caliber, or are we going to have a class of X size and then get the best possible students, and that's going to really reflect where our reputation is. I'm very interested in that part of this conversation, and I just want to make that emphasis, and I look forward to what comes down the pike. I think this is a very good development. Thank you.
Okay, I've got three more speakers, and we're going to go Regent Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Regent McMillan, thank you for this. Looking at your proposed resolution, item number 2, the last bullet, salary levels for faculty. In brief research, is that not the premier issue before us, the cost of faculty, and we run into the tenure issue? So we identify X number of faculty members at this level. We come back and say, folks, we have a problem. What can we do about it? I think that is the brief answer to the law school budget. The cost of faculty is too expensive for the number of students and the degrees in which we offer. And I agree with you about that, but what can we do about it?
Thank you for your comments, Regent Johnson. I don't know, do you want to try to answer that, Regent McMillan, or should we go on?
Chair, Chair Anderson, I don't know that I can answer that. I think you have put your finger on it. I was looking at a price and a quantity equation there, price of employees and quantity of employees, and then let the administration work with the law school to put some more clarity and some, I think Regent Beeson used guardrails there. I don't think we have them today. You've put your finger on the issue, and I don't think as a board we can solve that. We need them to help us solve it and bring some more. This is just meant to give them another tool to work on it. That's all it is.
Mr. Chairman, just follow up briefly. Question of President Kaler. Is there a possibility, and I'm not trying to get into the management of the law school, but is there a possibility going forward where there's encouragement, and I understand the tenure issue, that we could provide some incentives to faculty to, if you will, retire or transfer, whatever, so as we can manage this budget?
So, Chair Anderson, Regent Johnson, it is possible, and the university has from time to time instituted retirement incentive programs. We have not done so in a while. Those programs, my understanding is from labor law, need to be offered to all employees, not just those in a particular unit. So we would need to evaluate the impact of such a retirement incentive across the institution before I could tell you its applicability and effectiveness, efficacy, excuse me, that's the word I'm looking for, in this particular case.
Thank you.
Regent Simonson.
Pass.
Yeah, pass. Regent Powell.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. So I'm going to maybe continue on in the same vein as Regent Johnson, and that is that I understand that there's a goal, a deficit reduction goal. I got that from the last meeting, but it wasn't really clear to me that there was actually a plan, or any detail, to support how they were going to get to the goal. And so this is not an amendment to Chair McMillan's resolution, which I think is a really strong resolution, but just a suggestion that maybe as we administer this resolution early in the year, the law school come back and say, here is the plan. Here's how we plan to address this issue over the next few years. As Regent McMillan said, he isn't really sure whether these are the right metrics, but I think they suggest a direction. But I think we need the law school to come back and say, here are the metrics that we're going to use. We need to hear that early. Here's how we plan and feel we need to move those, and then at the end of the year they can report to us on whether they've achieved those. But I don't actually know what the metrics are, and I think we need to hear that from them early.
Thank you, Regent Powell. Regent Shoup.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. Thank you, Chair McMillan, for bringing this resolution to us. As you know, I'm concerned about the law school, and to make clear, I want us to have a successful law school. It's just whether or not we use the U.S. News rankings to determine whether or not we have a successful law school. And I'll go on to make another statement. A lot of people don't think we need more lawyers in the world today, but I think the University of Minnesota should produce more lawyers. At the current levels where we are now, we're becoming a boutique law school, and I'm not really sure, how the faculty work around, having a smaller number of students, at least over the last 5 or 6 years. But I do understand that the University of Minnesota is the best law school, at least in the region, which is saying something. It's good. And I do think that we are peers of Michigan. I'm sure there are a lot of people applying to both schools, so we're competitors. And they have, if you trust U.S. News, they have more prestige among, current lawyers and judges and law school professors. The peer ranking is much higher than ours. Their LSAT ranking levels 25 with the published numbers of the lower 25 percentile and the 75th percentile, not much higher than ours. So I think there is an opportunity for us to attract the students that either are applying to lower ranked law schools, and they can come here certainly, But I do think that we need to look at the resident issue because I know of particular cases of actual people who, for example, one I'm thinking of right now, came from Texas as a University of Texas graduate, applied to the law school there. As you know, they had a controversy there a few years ago because they had an admissions problem where people were getting into law school because they were getting favors. And the state legislature was involved, and the kids of the legislators were involved. But there's a reason that is a regional law school that is ranked slightly higher than us, but their in-state cost is less than ours. They're only charging $35,000, whereas we're charging $43,000 for our students, our resident students. But one of the problems that I have is that we're spending a substantial amount of money in law school right now, call it an investment, call it a subsidy, whatever. But only 1/3 of the students are actually Minnesota residents, and a lot of these people treat us like a national law school, which means they'll come here to go to school and then they're going to leave. They're going to go back to where they came from or pick a bigger city to go to. So I think all of these things need to be addressed, and I'm a little bit disappointed that this has been a known issue for several years, and yet we wait till May before the budget to have a presentation from the law school, even though their enrollment is probably pretty much known by now. And so I think there's a timing problem with the proposal here in that right now they probably know who's going to be attending in the fall. And then if we wait till the fall and start talking about this again and get a report or get a proposal by February, that next year's class will pretty much be baked in already. So we're kicking the can down the road a little bit. But I do appreciate the opportunity to have this resolution. And although I'm not supportive of the overall budget as it stands, I can support this, hoping that we can get somewhere in the future.
Thank you, Regent Hsu. It's time to take the vote on the resolution related to the law school. So I'm going to ask all those in favor of the resolution in front of you related to the law school signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. So we have in front of us right now the President's budget with the amendment on what I'll call attrition and the resolution related to the law school. Are we ready to vote on that, or does someone want to have a statement or any more discussion? Regent Lucas.
Thank you, Chair. I have two things. One is a question for Senior Vice President Burnett. I understand that we have not met our NR goals this year, but we don't have the final numbers yet. And I'm just wondering if your budget takes into consideration, do you have some kind of plug number in there that takes that into consideration, that we will have less NR money than we projected?
Senior Vice President Burnett, can you answer that?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Regent Lucas, we did budge a very conservative number in when we said about $8 million was the net. That assumes some attrition, and we won't know that until census date what it really becomes. But we believe we're tracking within the number we put in the budget. And again, I think that goes to the overall theme of this budget. It was built conservatively, and this was one element that was built conservatively because we didn't want to bet that we wouldn't have any decline in the NR numbers with a 15% tuition increase that was passed by the board with our recommendation back in December.
Thank you.
Okay, one more thing.
Regent Lucas.
Thank you. As you know, last time in the May meeting, I asked for this budget is a compromise. All budgets are a compromise, and I asked for just for discussion, not because I'm going to support it, but I wanted to know what we left on the table when we came to 2%, and we had a peek at that, and obviously we're not going to go there, but I'm hoping that next year we would have some opportunity to look at aspirational goals as well as cuts. And I don't think we've had quite that discussion yet, but I think Regent Swigham's resolution speaks to some of that, but we should look at the things that will drive us better and look at the things that maybe don't speak to tomorrow. So,
point well taken, Regent Lucas. I think we've got Regent Rocha who wants to speak, and then
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And going to that point, and when you observe times of recession, you find that the cuts are usually made without any hope of aspiration. It's really just for survival. And we are in a time where we're kind of someplace in between there, right? Where we have an opportunity, I think, to look at some of those places where we can gather savings and then use those savings to do a multitude of things. I think that you could, certainly from my perspective, if I looked across the administrative structure of the institution and say, that you could actually take some percentage of that very large number and commit to identifying those savings. It's a ton of work, Mr. Vice President, but it's the kind of thing that lets you approach things like ratcheting back some of the cost issues for students, but also being able to make investments in medical school improvements in other areas. So I think that's, I think we're in agreement. It's probably just a matter of some of the specifics. I appreciate a lot of things that have developed in our budgeting process, and some of these things we've talked about already. We have a clear picture of certain things, but there are still some places where I think that we are not where we need to be. I could go into some specific items. I look at things like, a continued subsidy, at least on the Twin Cities campus, of intercollegiate athletics. We've had a substantial increase in the revenue through some contracts and conference revenue, and yet we still have this subsidy. And if you actually break the number out, it created somewhat of a paradox, because a number of years ago we were talking about the fact that there are other institutions, Minnesota State universities, where students pay a student service fee in order to have intercollegiate athletics on campus. And the fact is, by having an O&M subsidy, you essentially have the same thing. It's a student service fee, it's just that the students don't have anything to say about it. Because if that same subsidy were applied to reduction of tuition, it would save students a couple $100s a semester. And I think that's something that the students might want to take a look at going forward. There are some other areas where we have some expenditures. I was surprised to see that we've got as much as we do committed to strategic planning. Obviously, that's been one of my key points over these last few years about the need for strategic planning, but I want to make sure that we don't see that as sort of a separate line item special. Our senior people, strategic planning is fundamentally, what you do, and I think you understand that. But I want to make sure that we look at that, and I'm curious as to how some of these things are spent, and so I do see that there are specific areas where we can take a closer look and identify some places where we can improve some of our efficiencies to pursue some of the more aspirational concepts that my colleague Regent Lucas just described. I am not going to vote for the budget. I am supportive of the 2% for compensation. I think that particularly as we see some of the changes in CPI that are current and foretold, here's why I'm voting no. For several years now, I've been asking for better data, a clearer picture for this board in how we're deciding who is receiving compensation increases and why. I believe that we have categories of employee that may be 10% below market. I think that we have some people that may be a few percentage points above market. But to simply say that everybody is in exactly the same place for an institution of this size, I don't know any corporation of this budget that would not have a clearer picture of the different categories of employee in order to be more direct and to be more assertive and strategic about how we allocate those resources. A year ago, we had a number of members of this board talk about the fact that they would support the budget with the expectation that this year we would get better data. We don't have better data. And so voting no on this budget is the only opportunity I have to make it clear how important I think it is that we improve that HR function in that analysis, because it is our #1 cost driver. And unless we're going to take that on, I don't think we can get to some of the questions about access for students and affordability and some of the investments that I think we need to make going forward. So I fully anticipate that this will pass, but for the purpose of establishing my reservations about our continued lack of clarity in that area, I'm going to vote no.
Okay, I'm going to remind you again, we're 30 minutes past the deal. We have a lot to take care of today, but this is very important. So if you have something to say, fine. We're going to keep calling. Regent Cohen.
Thanks, Chair Anderson. A few comments on this budget. First of all, I want to thank the administration for the process. As Regent Beeson said, I've been through lots of processes on the budget, and I believe this is the best one that I've been through so far. Lots of heads up early in the process. The budget addresses for me the two things that are most important to me and to the university, I believe, and President Kaler has often spoken about those. One is the excellence of this university, that we want to be and are, I believe, and really the economic driver of the state. And any way that we can increase the excellence of this university, to me, is extremely important. The second is the access for our students, and I believe that the budget addresses it. There is strong financial aid for the people who really, really need the financial aid. I agree with what Regent Beeson said wholeheartedly, that we are really providing, if we approve this budget, and I'm certainly going to vote for it, a gift to the future students and to the future boards so that they can continue to make this university a great university. So I very much am going to vote in favor.
Thank you. Regent Simonson, I didn't want to cut you off. Did you have? No, okay. Regent Hsu.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. I would agree with Regent Cohen. This is the best budget process. It's not very often, right, that we agree. I would agree this is the best budget process, at least that I've seen, and from what I hear, it's better than the past ones before I got here. I just want to make a point about the total cost of attendance, because we've talked a lot about tuition, but the total cost of attendance will actually go up by more than 2% because of the increase in housing rates and other, I guess, other things that go into the total cost of attendance. And I just want to make sure that we understand that total cost of tuition is now, I believe, less than 50% of the total cost of attendance, and I think that's a concern, because that's the actual number that the students have to finance, whether they're living lavishly or not. The numbers are big and getting bigger, and I think we do have to be cognizant of the overall cost, total cost of attendance. And then the other thing I would just say is that this budget has a lot of, I think, this budget process still has a lot of opportunities for us to improve on, and I think that there are some things that happened late in the game that I wasn't expecting this time, and I'm sure we'll have a chance to discuss this at our July retreat. Thank you.
Thank you, Regent Hsu. Regent Beeson, you want to take us home before the vote?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, the 2% increase that we're going to be voting on is a sticker price. It's a gross number, and the actual average increase for students will be, I don't recall what that number is, but it is less. The other thing I'd say, going back to Regent Lucas's comment about aspiration, that's a word we don't really talk about at this. We're so consumed with operating efficiencies and with budgets and with other sort of in the moment issues that we really I would hope maybe we can carve out some time at the retreat to talk about aspirations and talk about, and I know the strategic plan is going to try to deal with them, but the way we're setting up this plan feels more financial and more tactical than it does strategic at this point. Maybe I'm overstating that, but I hope we can just find time, step back, and talk about some of these sort of bigger goals and aspirations. Thank you.
Thank you, Regent Beeson. Regent Powell.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. I just wanted to briefly say again, I'm really troubled by the 2%. I'm really concerned about not only what we would do today, but what it might signal in terms of precedent for the future. I just think that we're in an environment now where resources at the state level are going to be constrained, and it's a new world that we have to live in and learn how to live with it. And so I'm not going to support the 2%. I'm not going to support the budget.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion on the budget?
Mr.
Mr. Chairman.
Regent Johnson.
Mr. Chairman, thank you to the administration. I fully support this proposed budget. Our former colleague, John Fabinius, one of the most analytical, thoughtful regents that we served with in the past, on his exit speech said to us, take care of this university. Take care of this university for the people of this state. I take that very seriously, that we take care of this university not only for our faculty, staff, and current students, but those that will come in the future. All one has to do is walk across campus or go to some community and the issue of the University of Minnesota comes up. Folks are very proud of this university. The faculty are very proud to teach here. Students, once they get that degree, which we've all been part of handing the diploma, it's a special time, a special moment, a special piece of paper. 2%. I'm sitting here in my Norwegian Lutheran mind thinking about 2% in 2018. Where can we go today and someone says, well, it's just increased 2%. I don't know about the rest of you, but healthcare costs, insurance premiums, eating in restaurants, I would love to just have that ceiling of 2%. So as a student, and granted, it's not easy being a student, no doubt about it, we're talking about $5 a day, $5 per week increase for the year, offset by scholarships and other aids. Education and the pursuit of education is a sacrifice, no doubt about it. It costs something. It costs money, it costs time, it costs effort, it costs our parents, it costs our spouses. The question we have to ask, are we willing to make some sacrifices for the betterment of ourselves, our state, and society? I wish we didn't have to. I wish we didn't have to raise tuition at the university. But I think it's a good investment. It's appropriate. It's been vetted, as been stated by many of our colleagues. Regent Hsu, I agree with you on a number of things that we need to explore, and it's been talked about. The law school. There are other colleges. There's other places that we need to become more efficient. And I think the administration has heard us loudly and clearly today about that. We have some distance to go, no doubt about it. I think it would be wrong, just wrong, for us not to support this budget going forward with the understanding we have some work to do. We have work to do. And so I would ask my colleagues respectfully that we support this 2% budget going forward, and appreciate respectful, thoughtful discussion, Mr. Chair, we've had today in many respects. Thank you.
Thank you, Regent. You know, I was just sitting up here thinking it's been a great discussion. It's been a great discussion today. I'm probably the only guy who hasn't said anything of where I am, but at 9:33 and a half hour over my meeting, I'm going to hold that because you don't want to listen to me anyway. So at this point in time, I'm going to ask for a vote on the President's budget with the addendum on the attrition that Regent Svigum has offered and we passed, and with the resolution on the law school. So you know you're voting on the budget with those two things. Any questions on what we're voting on? Okay. At this time, all those in favor of the President's approved budget signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
No. I think it's 8-4. Do you want to show hands? Everybody okay? I think motion passes. Okay, we're on to the next item of agenda. The President's recommended annual capital improvement budget. While Vice President Bertelson's taking the table, we can have about 12 seconds and stand and stretch.
Thank you.
We're all stiff up here, Vice President Bertelson, but since you just got to walk to the table, I'm going to let you go ahead with your presentation and get us back on track.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That'll be my job to try to catch us up. So this is for approval of the budget that you reviewed last month. The annual capital budget is year one of the 6-year capital plan. It includes projects that are over $1 million. You'll see the total is for $212 million. This has been adjusted from what you've seen in May based on what was the final bonding bill that the legislature approved and the governor signed. The changes include 3 additions. The Institute for Child Design is being advanced using donor funds, just the design part of that. CTSI renovation is part of a broader health sciences reconfiguration, and some additional athletics R&R to make sure we can move ahead with the HVAC improvement in the Maturi Pavilion. The bottom half of the table reflects the changes from the state capital request and the reductions from our request to what was actually approved and signed. You can see the breakdown by type of funds across the $212 million. You can see of that amount, the $36 million of debt, where that debt is assigned to, that list of projects. And there's a resolution, and with that I'll sit for questions.
Okay. President Kaler, Senior Vice President Burnett, do you have things to add about the capital request? We've been through this.
Yeah, Regent Anderson, in the interest of helping you catch up and not be criticized by your colleagues for running late, I will restrain my comments.
Okay, Vice President Burnett, Senior Vice President Burnett.
Just to briefly, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think, again, if you remember our budget request, it was taking care of what we have. And I also just want to say we are very grateful to the legislature for the bonding bill that allows Pillsbury Hall to go forward, some more form of HEAPR moving forward, which is very helpful, and some academic renewal at Crookston and Morris. And I think the first ever help for the Glen Sheen asset that belongs to the university in Duluth. So I just think, I think we're very grateful. There was a lot of tenuous times, and I think credit's due to our many around this table and many supporters of this university, but most notably J.D. Burton, Matt Kramer, and his team, that we actually have some state capital funds in this budget for you to approve today. And so I just feel like we need to thank the legislature again for its commitment to the university.
We need to probably have some discussion on this, but prior to doing that, I'm wondering if we could get a motion to put the capital request on the table.
So moved.
Regent McMillan moves. Second by Regent Hsu on his way into the room. Okay, so we do have the capital request moved and seconded, so we can have discussion. Regent Svigum, were you up for discussion, or were you motion?
If I could, Mr. Chairman, and
Regent Svigum?
Back, but still looking forward. Mr. Bertelsen, where are we? The most important, I think, piece besides HEAPR was the Pillsbury Hall that the legislature approved. Where are we in that process right now? Schematic design being done? When will the contract be bid? Do you have any idea of where we are in this Pillsbury situation?
Vice President Bertelsen.
Mr. Chair, Regent Swigum, we have pre-design was completed approximately 18 months ago and waiting for this process to be approved now. We are very soon to start the schematic process. We have the architect signed for the rest of for the duration of the projects, and so that schematic part will launch quickly. And I don't have in my head, when Mr. Gritter's here, we can maybe answer that question exactly when we believe construction will start, but that will be, we have the full several stages of design, and we'll bring schematics back to this board.
Mr. Chairman, second to Regent Lucas, Regent Lucas being the person who is the pusher, the initiator of of Pillsbury Hall. I've heard some concern about the design that this is a gem. This building is a gem, Mr. Bertelsen, and we need to make sure in the design that we protect that design of Pillsbury Hall. And there's been some concern raised to me regarding the design that it's not exactly what people were anticipating. Have you heard that concern, and is there a place for us?
Vice President Burnett, or Bertelsen, have you heard some of that?
Mr. Chair and Regent Swingham, yes, I have. Those words have trickled over to me. So I encourage those who have concerns certainly to come talk to me. I'd be glad to do that. There is, as we're going to talk about the next presentation, the process of design. There's a lot of design and conversation yet to be had. I can assure you that we care deeply about the historic nature of this building. We are not changing the structure at all. Of course, it will look like a very new building, and I understand where there are some concerns, and we will certainly be addressing.
Thank you. I believe Senior Vice President Burnett would like to address that.
I'd just like to echo Regent Sviggum and for all the regents about this project. We clearly will have a committee that's with the College of Liberal Arts, because the English department will be the principal. This will be their principal home. But I just also want to caution that we'll have a committee that tries to come up with the best designs, but I don't think we can promise the administration that 100% of everyone who has an interest in Pillsbury Hall will be satisfied with the outcome. I just think there's going to be folks who think we ought to do this instead of that and this instead of that. So I just want to understand, I think what Vice President Bertelsen said is dead on right. We intend to honor the historic structure while modernizing the inside and stretching that $36 million. Let's not forget $12 million is coming from the campus, and debt for the College of Liberal Arts, 24, thankfully, from the state. But I think our goal will be to get the best thinking around the best programmatic needs for the English department, which will be their principal home, and our role is really to listen to that team. And I just can't promise that 100% of everyone who has an interest in that building will be satisfied once the schematic design comes here.
Regent Hsu.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. I caught wind of something yesterday, but I want to make sure we're all talking about the same thing. So, I mean, what is the concern exactly, and where did it come from? Like, is there a picture floating around, or how?
I have not heard anything, so I'm going to ask Senior Vice President Burnett maybe has an answer.
We were forwarded an email from the board office that had come from a retired faculty member who had interest in this project long ago, a member of the English department. And there were some discussions about the entryways and whether those were going to be continued or changed in the, and I believe they were discussed long before Vice President Bertelsen or I waded into this project. But I promise you, we will tee this up. We will have the committee work through the structure, and our goal is to deliver a great project to the College of Liberal Arts, the Department of English, that they can be proud of and that serves the students in that department well. So we're opening up all those things now that we actually have something to talk about, because now assuming you approve this budget, we actually have now a path forward to renovate Pillsbury Hall, which hasn't been renovated really since it was built in the 1880s. So,
thank you.
Regent Lucas.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say I think it is an iconic building, maybe the most iconic building on this campus, and I hope that when all is said and done, the preservation community applauds.
Thank you. Any other discussion on the capital budget? Looks like Regent McMillan.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. I'm going to support this, but I have a couple questions from a forward-looking standpoint. And one of them has to do with the system-wide strategic planning process and the HEPR allocation. And I don't need a deep dive into that today, but that's a formulaic outcome, I believe. So when we get 45 of 200 million, then I think the formula is applied and everybody gets a lesser amount. I'd like to encourage the administration and the board to, as we bring a strategic plan forward, to look at that formula. I think it's something that's been in place for a long, long time, and now let me frame my question. It has been here a long time, and does it ever change? Do we ever look at an outcome like this year where we got something less than a quarter of what we asked for? And how do you go across your red, green building design, the plan that tells you the condition of the buildings? Do we modify that formula, or is it always just very, very certain and driven by what the formula is? Does that make sense?
Mr. Chair, Regent McMillan, yes, the formula in my time has been changed several times. Once it was initially was just base square feet. Over time, then we felt with the additional information about the facility condition assessment, we took that into account to make that part a larger part of the conversation. So if something had a place that the university was newer and in better shape, that we try to drive a little bit more of the resources to the place that was in poorer shape over time. So that's a balance now between, and then we pull back to add a little bit more about square feet again. So it's always been some balance. In addition to that, though, we have an initial formula nearly every year. I can't say every year. We look at if that arbitrarily is going to cut out some project from proceeding. So I would say when we made the changes, what we've done is generally the Twin Cities campus has given up some of its allocation in order to help one of the system campuses to achieve some project that is just short of, because the allocation percent often is just doesn't allow that particular project to happen. So that is something every year we look at to see, is there something that we're just missing? Is there a way that we can make an adjustment? And that's a review that we do to not just rely on the formula.
Thank you. President Kaler, you wanted to weigh in.
Sure. One small point and then a larger. The smaller point is that as we manage the system campuses, to Vice President Bertelson's point, the Romano Gym in Duluth is a really good example of us being able to smartly put together pieces from a variety of sources to enable that important project to go forward. So that while there is a formula that provides, I would say, guidance, we certainly are try to be very both strategic and appropriately tactical about how we deploy against opportunities. My more important point is in my haste to ensure that Jerry got back on time, I really do greatly appreciate the investment the legislature has made in us, the leadership of the governor, in proposing a robust bonding bill, and the confidence of the people of the state of Minnesota in the investment they've made in the university. And I share with Vice President Burnett my admiration for J.D. Burton, Genevieve Pomodoro, and others on our team who navigated through tricky waters to land this portion of the bonding bill. So I'd like my gratitude to be on the record as well.
Thank you, President Kaler. Regent Chu.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. I want to echo the thanks to the legislature and the governor. I think these are great investments in the university, and I just have two questions. One on the Glen Sheen portion. So, what has to happen next for any progress to be made in actually spending the money? Because I know there was a match associated with that, and I don't know if they have any money to match against it yet. And then, secondly, my colleagues, Chair McMillan and Regent Rocha, were with me. We were together at the budget input meeting up in Duluth, and we heard about some complaints actually about, I think it was Anderson Hall, which has some HVAC problems, and to the extent where they have to cancel classes sometimes because it's, I guess, too hot. And I wasn't aware of it at the time, but I just hope that the HEAPR money can be used to solve that problem.
Thanks, Regent Chu. I just chuckle at Regent McMillan from Duluth. I don't know if I've ever been to Duluth when it's too hot. But Regent Simonson?
I'm in the process of onboarding, so if this question doesn't make sense, I'm sorry for it. But how does this impact debt going forward? How will it impact future budgets?
Great question for Senior Vice President Burnett.
The slide before you, Regent Simonson and members, thank you, Mr. Chair, shows that we do have a debt component of about $36 million, and part of that is the 2/3, 1/3 agreement we had on Pillsbury. So that will have to find its way into a future CLA budget as we take down the debt to pay the contractor to do the renovation. These other ones have various fund sources that are in the docket about different ways they come, but the university will use some of its debt capacity ability to borrow money, and over time we'll pay these back, because these are assets that have a useful life of 25 to 30 years. So as opposed to trying to find all the cash up front, much like a mortgage, we're going to take out mortgages on these projects and have them paid by students today, students 5 years from now, students 15 years from now, and that's just really the way we've done this. And so these different projects have, the nice thing about HEAPR is there's no match from the university, so they're 100% state funded. funded and don't require any issue of capital or on our part. But we also do bring reserves to some of these projects where a department may have been saving up, and a combination of debt, reserves, and maybe a state appropriation or not puts a project together, has enough money to finish. And to President Kaler's point, that's what we did without debt at Romano Gym last year when the Duluth campus was really close, within $1 million of having them solved, and the system, we put in $1 million to get that project rolling, and it's underway as we speak. So I think there's just each one trying to make sure you can get a complete thing done, and debt is a piece of it in some cases, and we bring that forward in any debt issuance. We haven't talked about this yet in your onboarding, but any debt issuance formal by the university has to be approved by the Board of Regents.
Okay. And I would just tell you, when you're onboarding, something that's good to me, just in the last month, we have gotten both reports from Moody's and S&P that reaffirmed our credit rating, and they're a great read just for the simple fact on how people with neutral eyes really look at this university. And I really enjoy reading them just to see what, like I say, people with really neutral eyes on our financial performance look at us. President Kaler, and then I think Regent McMillan, then we'll take a vote on this.
To amplify, expand Vice President Burnett's point, this is university debt, and it's served a variety of ways, several of which Vice President Burnett mentioned, but he did not mention philanthropy, and there are substantial naming opportunities, particularly within Pillsbury, and so we anticipate a robust fundraising campaign around that. In some of the research-related spaces, all federal research grants bring with them indirect costs as well as the direct cost to conduct the research. That IDC, indirect cost funds flow, can also be used at the unit's discretion to help retire debt. So don't leave with the thought that all of this debt will fall to students. In fact, a lot of it will be borne otherwise.
Regent McMillan, did you want to say something? Then we'll take
just a quick follow-up. Regent Shu's question reminded me of the Greater Minnesota academic renewal portion of our ask, which was separate from EPR. And my question to the administration is, was that something that was one time that we could go after, or is that something we could consider again? Because a couple of our system campuses got the money and a couple did not. So I don't know if, and I'm not looking to start a debate about what we're going to ask for next year. I just didn't know if that was unique and something we can't ask for again, or if we can restart that and ask again.
My opinion on your question is that there is support for Greater Minnesota to do some of that, so I think it's maybe something to look at. At this time, I'm going to ask for a vote on the motion that's in front of us, which was a recommend approval of the resolution related to the fiscal year 2019 annual capital improvement budget. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Senior Vice President Bertelson, but stay at that table. And I think Assistant Vice President Gritters is going to join you for an oversight discussion on how we have folks handle capital projects. And I guess Mr. Brunette is going to begin.
Just briefly, members, this was part of the work plan that the Finance and Operations Committee had during the year to walk through, now that you've seen these capital budgets in the hundreds of millions of dollars, how do we manage them at the university and what's the process? These are big projects and they're very complex, and we wanted you to have a deeper understanding of how we approach these projects individually. What I would share with you is one of the things since coming to the university I've been very impressed with is the Capital Projects Management Group here that manages not just the projects on the Twin Cities campus, but like the Duluth AMS building that's underway right now and across the whole system. This really is a centralized function within the university. So it's very important on these complex capital projects that we have owner's eyes, and who you're going to hear from today between Mike and Assistant Vice President Bruce Gritters is how do we approach these projects and bring them in on time, on budget, and meeting the needs and expectations of the end users. And so that's what the point of this presentation was, to walk you through quickly today. Thank you.
Vice President Bertelson, would you put us through?
Mr. Chair, I think if I ended now, I'd be 5 minutes late, so I will move quickly. Today we're going to review, as we said, the capital process, planning and project management. 2 years ago, we made this very similar presentation, but so some of you have seen it, but most of you, this is new. So we want to talk about the life cycle of capital planning and projects. All projects start with planning. Where is the need? Whether it's a physical need, because the building, regardless of the program staying the same, there's a facility need, or there's an academic programmatic need. That once we agree on those priorities, we look into what the funding process is, and finally then we move, once funding is here, what's the design and delivery process. You can see in this chart, kind of following through that, all those steps, the gold boxes are the parts that come to you. So I just want to highlight that. Those are the parts, the boxes and steps that take board action along the way. Large projects that we've, especially things like Pillsbury, I would say large projects can stretch over a period of 5 years. People behind me could say Pillsbury has been taking about 3 decades. But the steps that move along, as long as they have approval, we start with pre-design, then it goes, this is for state projects, so at least almost a whole year, and usually in a best case, if it gets funded the first time, is in the state request section until we get the funds, then we move into design and delivery. So now I'm going to turn to Mr. Gritters to talk through some of the pieces of that process.
Thank you, Mr. Bertelsen. Mr. Gritters?
Okay, beginning with the selection of the architect engineer. This is for where the fee is going to exceed $100,000. The selection is done via a request for proposal process, and that is done either by university purchasing or by the state designer selection board in the case of state funding. The process is generally the same regardless of which of the two entities manages the procurement process, and the basis for review and selection is generally the same as well. We look at the criteria are project approach and work plans, team qualifications. If it's not a state designer selection board process, we look at fee. SDSB does not look at fee as one of the initial criteria. We negotiate that at the end on those projects. Project schedule. Targeted business goals are one of the means or the criteria for review, and then we go through an interview process. Evaluations for the request for proposal are typically done by teams comprised of subject matter experts, professionals. So it would be capital project delivery staff, planning staff, as well as operations and maintenance staff and user groups. It's a transparent, open, and competitive process. It's fair, and it takes 6 weeks roughly from start to finish if it's done by university services or by university purchasing. You add another 6 weeks to that process if you go through the state designer selection board. Next, the contractor selection process is very similar to the designer selection process. It's managed by University Services Purchasing. Again, it's done by a request for proposal process looking at criteria such as team qualifications, project cost, project schedule, targeted business goals, safety record, as well as an interview process. And again, the evaluation team is the same makeup as the designer selection team. Timeline on that, again, would be approximately 6 weeks. Our methodology for delivering projects are delivered via the best value regardless of the delivery method selected. Best value means we look at both price and performance. We look at performance criteria including performance on previous projects, the timeliness of that performance, customer satisfaction on those projects, record of minimizing change orders and their budget performance on those projects, the ability to prepare appropriate project plans in the case of a designer, the technical capacities of both our design and construction entities, as well as the ability to assess and minimize risk. Some of the benefits of best value delivery. Since moving to best value, well, before we moved to best value in 2005, we had a total of 33 claims on 11 projects, and I believe the initial claims on those exceeded $11 million. Today, we have 0 claims primarily attributable to utilizing the best value delivery process. It leads to a team approach, which is less adversarial. It's not a low bid wins mentality where it doesn't matter how we perform in this job, if I'm low next time you have to use me. Our process working with university purchasing is fair, open, and transparent, and parallels other public and private sector selection processes. And because we eliminate claims and we eliminate aggressive change order approach and we avoid the bid challenges that are sort of the signature of low bid wins, we both save time and money. So here use primarily three project delivery methods. The first is one that everybody's familiar with, design, bid, build. Essentially, it's two contracts. First, we select a designer, we design it, then we put it out to bid and select a contractor, and the contractor builds it. The last two, construction manager at risk and design build, are similar in that we select a designer or we select a design builder. The design progresses, and before the design is complete, the contractor interacts with the designer to adjust both the scope, the schedule, the materials to achieve a budgetary perspective. This next slide shows one of the advantages of using construction manager at risk and design build, just purely looking at a schedule perspective. As you can see, the design bid build methodology is very linear and takes the longest amount of time. If you have a construction manager at risk delivery process or a design build process, you get the benefit of adding the contractor team to the design process early so they can do cost estimating, value engineering, and make sure that the design ultimately achieves all of our objectives.
So when we think about where the cost of construction, it's important to highlight that only a quarter of a building's total life cycle cost is its first cost. So we pay attention a lot of how much we see the sticker shock of a first building, but really that's just a small piece of over the lifetime, because we can see about, if a quarter of that, the 75% of it is in the operation and maintenance over the lifetime of that building. So though we are very serious about our first cost, and we focus on our life cycle costs, the reliability of the building, its durability, its energy efficiency, that add up to those costs. But that's not the whole story either, because all that cost together is only about 8% when you think about the total cost of including the people that are in the building. So though we are serious about first cost, we focused on life cycle. The big issue is functionality. Is it a building that does what we want it to do? Does good research supported by it? Is it a great building for learning? Is it the great place to live and learn to do it? So if we fail on that, it doesn't matter what the cost is, it was all a waste. So we have to deliver a building that meets the functionality and has high utilization. That's where you can do a better buildings, better space, but maybe less of it. That's where we'll really have the opportunity to impact that cost. And that's probably my most important message. I should stop right there. But of course we won't. We're going to talk just briefly about the factors that lead to cost. Most of the factors that we face are similar to the private sector. We have the same contractors, the same architects, the same suppliers, and are buying the materials at the same price that anybody else does. So sometimes people think there's a magic cost differential about being here. What is different about the university is that the kinds of buildings we build, the kinds of programs, other people aren't building BSL-3 labs, aren't building biology labs or animal research, and many times they aren't thinking the long term. So we are an owner for forever. We're the infinity owner. We're not turning stuff over. So what does that go into how we think about buildings and over a very long time? Many of our buildings are what we could call maybe a legacy. We're intending that the building construction is going to last 50 years, or as Pillsbury, well over 100 years. And that you may every so often, every 50 or 90 years, you're going to do a major renovation. Those buildings and much of the structure stays, and that's a long-term investment that is stable and continues. But that's not always the right answer. Not every building is meant to be that. Sometimes you want maybe a more commercial building where in that same time period you might build and start over several times. So in the long cycle, from the total cost of ownership, including first cost, operating costs, in general, our analysis shows that legacy buildings on over average are about 25% less total cost of ownership over the full life cycle of this time period. Now that's long projections, and it isn't saying that the one answer is always the right one. We have legacy buildings like Tate, which was a 90-year-old building. We just went under a major renovation. But we also built things like the Salt Sand Building. It might be there for 30 years. We don't need to build a monument building for everything. So it does go, how we think about any given building and we make determinations goes into our university standards. We manage the total cost of ownership by setting comprehensive building standards that guide our contractors to meet our expectations. And we routinely review those standards to make sure we're keeping up with modern technology, materials management, and process. So that's part of what we routinely do.
Construction and projects at the university are complex. First of all, the university often allocates the cost of infrastructure, including steam, chilled water, and other normal, typically utilities, to the cost of the project, rather than creating a separate utility fund. While that financial rationale may be sound, the result is project costs that at least appear on their face to cost more than their private sector counterparts. The university also includes other items in building construction costs, such as move management and temporary relocation costs. We don't have a lot of extra swing space, so many times we're moving the chess pieces around during especially complex multiple move projects like mechanical engineering renovation and TAPE. Third, we have many state and other governmental requirements that apply to our projects. We have the SDSB selection process that adds time to the schedule. Time is money. We have the requirement for providing a payment and performance bond for the full amount of the construction contract, which between the contractor and the subcontractors, which they typically may turn around and say, I want to cover my risk, you get a bond too. That'll add more than 1% to the total cost of construction. Similarly, we have special procurement provisions that come to us from the state or from other sources, including the requirement to use U.S. steel. So that can add to the complexity of our project. We have fair contracting laws, which require us to certify that all of our contractors don't do many bad things. And it's just paperwork, but it adds time, it adds money, it adds complexity. We have B3, SB 2030 sustainability requirements that come to us. We have an allocation of up to 1% for Project ART on state-funded projects. So there are many things that apply to public sector projects that don't apply to private sector projects, and they add to the complexity and sometimes to the cost. Finally, we have a university culture that encourages projects to be under budget. Essentially, projects that are over budget are viewed negatively. This results in higher initial cost estimates due to higher contingencies to make sure that doesn't happen. We're very diligent reviewing estimates from the contractors to make sure they don't over contingency, but that's a challenge. And so I think, again, what we want to do is make sure we're diligent, but that we have the appropriate contingency for the complexity and the risks associated with any particular project. Projects undergo many touch points. The university has approval requirements. As Mike showed at the beginning of the presentation, we come to you at SD review so that you have the opportunity to see where the design is headed. Obviously, because there are 6 Regents meetings per year, the process might add time to a project schedule or require speeding up or slowing down of the design process. In addition, we have a consensus process. Again, I think that was referenced earlier in the context of Pillsbury. There are many different user groups, each with their own unique perspective. Building occupants have a perspective. Energy management has a perspective. I want to make sure my building is efficient from an energy management perspective. So each one of those has their own driver, and they all add to the complexity and sometimes to the cost. I'm not saying it's wrong, it's just a fact. Finally, there's operational team reviews, and those operational teams, like land care, have a primary responsibility to take care of the properties of the university. It's a secondary responsibility for them to look at our plan sets and give us comments. Hopefully we pick up most of their requirements, but sometimes those are missed because it's a secondary responsibility of theirs, and that may result in an added cost or a change. And finally, we have opportune scope additions to projects. Sometimes it's R&R or HEAPR type projects are added just because we happen to be there on a major capital project. It's what the screen door doctrine. While you're there, you might as well fix my screen door. And we have some of that. It gets added to the project scope. It appears to increase the project cost, but actually it's a separate issue. So,
good news. I think we'll take our project management fees are average 1.3% of total project costs versus the private sector. That's just a good news story. A certain sense of the number of volume of kind of projects by the size of those projects. That's in your docket, so you can review that as you want. And finally, just a couple pictures of where we do want to celebrate the project managers and the project management that leads to success for these projects. They don't happen by mistake. Mr. Gritters and his team work really hard to do that, and they bring a lot of quality to those projects. And with that, we are ready for your questions.
Thank you, Vice President Bertelsen. Good review on our what we're doing to build buildings and how we go about it. Since this is just a review, and we've got 3 action items left on the agenda by 10:45, I'm going to take questions, but if we could be very brief with them because we're not voting on anything here. Regent Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the spirit of being supportive of the university and administration over the years, this is an area, and I'm going to sound, it's negative, and it's not personal about you gentlemen, but over the years, people have commented, people in the construction business have commented about, you know, are you sure you want to do business with the university when it comes to construction and remodeling? The bureaucracy is overarching. I've heard it repeatedly from large companies, medium-sized companies, and so in this discussion we've had today about budget and costs, I wonder if it would be prudent going forward, I don't know how to do this and we don't need to formalize it, taking a look at how we can reduce, I mean, listening to your presentation, there's a lot of hoops to go through, which translates into costing money. It's costly. And I just have to believe there's easier, more efficient ways of building buildings. And I'll give you the example, in my community, in the building that was remodeled on the Regional Treatment Center campus, 2.5 years, remodeled, not built. And the contractors and subcontractors said, Dean, don't ever ask me to work with the university again, because I'm not going to do it. And that's a small project. So again, it sounds negative, it sounds critical, but I'm looking at a larger picture. Are there ways in which we can become more efficient and friendly to the construction industry?
Vice President Berthelsen.
Mr. Chair and Regent, of course, we're always looking for ways to try to do that. This is a thing that Mr. Gritters and I have talked about to put on our work plan for 19 to do a review now that he's in this position of a total of a couple months. So yes, and there will be multiple steps to that. There's going to be process things that we can propose that can maybe speed up the decision making or reviews. I would say, in spite of the kind of the comments maybe you've heard, I think I can say that we routinely get very strong and many contractors who do want to work here. So I'd be more concerned, frankly, from your comment, if I felt that contractors and subcontractors were avoiding working at this location. We have a very large variety of contractors and subcontractors who want to work here over and over, and many others who come meet with us who feel like they didn't get their opportunity and would like to. So that's not to diminish the concern over cost, but there certainly are some things that are unique about the kinds of programs and projects that we do at this institution that aren't routine and cookie cutter. You know, if I can build a whole lot of targets, one after another, and we don't do things that are the same. So that adds a challenge.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for that. Again, it's not personal. It's just a process that has evolved over a period of time. And I think anything you and you folks can do to improve that process would be most beneficial to the bottom line in the university.
President Kaler, you want to say something?
Thank you, Chair Anderson. Vice President Berthelsen and I have had any number of conversations about this subject, and I won't be defensive, but I will say that almost all of the buildings to the target cookie cutter or the apartment building model that we build are complicated, number one. Number two, we put a great many constraints on contractors that the private sector doesn't. We respect the need to maintain our operations. We respect the need to maintain classes. We respect the need to be able to transit across campus in a variety of ways that are constraints we also respect the needs of the ultimate client, who is the academic user typically of that building. They may have programs that evolve, they may have opportunities that emerge during the planning process that require change orders that are both time consuming and expensive, and in the private sector the answer to that request would typically be no, live with it. We also build buildings that last 75 to 100 years. That's quite different than a 25-year stick and sheetrock thing that can be thrown up somewhere else. So there are a variety of mitigating circumstances, and each one of these maybe adds a percent of difficulty or cost, but after a while it adds up to a delta. Can we be more streamlined and efficient? We absolutely can, and we are in that process of asking and answering those questions. One of them, frankly, will be asking hard questions about when do we need to come to the board, because given the pacing of a board meeting, that may mean things sit on the table for 3-4 weeks while we're waiting for board action. So all of those are in the mix, and we'll come back with ways to be better.
Thank you. Thank you, President Kaler. Regent Beeson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Going to Regent Johnson's comments, I'm in the business where I work with contractors. I have for many, many years. I will say this, that there used to be more complaints in years previous, a decade ago, when the project management system was really underdeveloped. There were a lot of cost overruns. The bid packages were not well thought out. I don't hear those sort of complaints now, but there is a barrier to doing business because of the process, and a lot of the process is public policy related. We pay prevailing wages. We have set aside. We have. We're building this sort of industrial strength product that is. We have. There's a lot of process there. The issue that I think from a board standpoint, and I don't really hear complaints from contractors, but there is a tension about the allocation of big projects. I think you do a good job in spreading the work out. We have a lot of great contractors and architects in this town. There is a sense that you've got your favorites, and that's any business does, because consequences of picking the wrong one at a time-sensitive project are pretty significant. But I would hope what they want to see is sort of pathways to getting bigger projects over time, and you need to be sensitive, not that you're not, but sensitive to developing those, so it's not just the regular two people whose names we see all the time around the bigger projects.
Thank you. I am just going to remind, we've got some more people that want to ask questions, and I'm going to call them in a minute. At 10:25, we're going to go off this subject because we do have to get to 3 items that require action, and we all have to be in different rooms by 11 o'clock. So Regent Powell.
Thank you, Chair Anderson, and thank you, gentlemen, for the presentation. I appreciate the expertise and the diligence that your team brings. So the question I have is, thinking about the entire sort of built infrastructure of the footprint of the university and all the capital management that goes along with that, which you just described. I mean, is there a kind of a total overview, or we capture somewhere the total financial burden, and footprint of all of this, and then accompanying it a strategy for kind of how we manage it, how we reduce it. I mean, the energy and water and maintenance and all of these things. I think the board would be interested in understanding how that's managed in totality and strategies when you think about this, this huge sort of built environment that we have here. How do we manage the cost burden of that to the university, and how do we what's the commitment to reducing that burden, and where are the key opportunities to do that over the next 5 or 10 years? I guess the question is, do we do that? Probably be of interest to the board at some point to see how that's being approached, because it's a lot of cost, and if we can take it out for think of the previous discussion, it's extremely helpful.
Any comment on that, Vice President Bertelsen?
Very briefly, Mr. Chair, Regent, I'd be glad to have a longer conversation about it. In short, we look very aggressively and think as a whole campus when it comes to utility infrastructure. We have maybe one of the most integrated district energy systems anywhere. So that's one, and we're going to be updating a new energy master plan for the campus. We're launching that this fiscal year. In addition, even the cost pool structure, financial structure is created to create an incentive for people to manage space, that our utility and operating costs are allocated to each user based on how much space they have, to create that incentive to make sure that people are paying attention to it. But we know that there's a lot more work, and really the biggest opportunity, to your point, is about how do we help provide better information to colleges and units about the space utilization that they have. And we do a great job in certain places like classrooms, greenhouses, and we have work to do when it comes to labs and offices.
Thank you. Regent Lucas.
Thank you, Chair. My comment really has to do with the part of the campus that we have no control over. And most people don't realize that the neighborhoods are part of our campus, whereas our own footprint, that's where we can control things. So one of the risks and the things that I, get a nightmare over is some of the quality of the buildings that I see going up in the near campus are not 50-year buildings, they're not maybe even 20-year buildings, and I worry about them all aging at the same time and what it will look like around here in 20 years, but we have no control over that, but I think it's a risk.
Any comment, Vice President Bertelsen? Okay, thank you, Regent Lucas. Regent Simonson.
Yeah, I just want to thank you and your team, as well as the legislature, for your support of the BSL-3 lab at the College of Veterinary Medicine. I think it was long overdue for the college to compete with Iowa State and Kansas State in research. This building is essentially needed, and I think the return on investment in this case will be seen.
Thank you. Thank you, Regent Simonson. Regent Omari.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. There's been some good remarks. I agree, Regent Beeson, that the types of complaints that I hear from community members have shifted significantly. And to Dean Johnson's point, I actually think that the bureaucracy is hurting the smaller businesses because Mortensen cares about bureaucracy, but not nearly as much as smaller construction company that's trying to get in and get that leg up on the $5 million project versus the $100 million project that could change the trajectory of their grandkids' lives. And so the rumor or the word that I hear, aside from the bureaucracy piece, is let's do business with the U because they're a cash cow that gives high contingencies and will never be over budget. And so I think this is a conversation that we need to continue to be engaged in. And again, I say that in the light of the number of times I hear this has decreased over the 5 years that I've been on the board. But I think as we move forward, we need to continue to engage in this conversation.
Thank you, Regent Omari. Any comment on that?
No.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask that you stay there, Vice President Bertelsen. Mr. Gritters, I appreciate all you did, and you can stay there if you want to, but I think Associate Vice President Volna is going to join if he's here, and we're going to go through a couple action items. If Vice President Volna comes up, just so to remind my board members, we discussed these last board meeting, last finance, and we should know a lot about them. They're the amendment to the University Square lease in Rochester, which is our main campus in Rochester, and the sale of land at Umore Park. So, Mr. Bertelsen, Mr. Volna, do you want to take us away on number one? Well, actually, let me entertain a motion to recommend approval of the amendment to the University Square lease in Rochester.
So moved.
So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. We've got that on the table so we can discuss it. Do you have anything to show us on that?
Chair Anderson, members of the committee, in your materials you'll see that there is a description of the write-up, which is essentially unchanged from the last month's meeting. There's a map that shows the location of it. I have nothing to add beyond that we would support this. This is consistent with the campus's plan.
Terrific, thank you. Any discussion around here? If not, I'm going to ask for the vote. This is it's been moved and seconded. We recommend approval of the amendment to the University Square lease in Rochester. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Let's go to the second item. And that second item is the sale of 435 acres of Umore Park for residential, commercial, and mixed-use development, Dakota County, Minnesota. We've talked about that. I'm going to entertain a motion to sell that property.
So moved.
So moved.
Second. It's been moved and seconded to sell the 435 plus acres at Umore Park. Anything you want to tell us about that, Vice President Volna?
Chair Anderson, members of the committee, again, we had discussions about this last month. We provided you last year with an update on the strategy and the trajectory of activity out at Umore Park. This is consistent with that. I would also like to make sure that we acknowledge that we have some folks in the audience here today from the city of Lakeville and also from the company that's buying Rosemount, and the folks from Newland who are buying the property. I think you've got the names up there. Perhaps you
Did they bring a check? I'm just kidding.
Chair Anderson, we think their credit is good, so we're going to wait for the approval tomorrow before we actually collect on them.
Senior Vice President Burnett, I think, wanted to acknowledge him, so I'm going to call on him.
You know, I just want to also say to the board, we've worked very collaboratively with Rosemount and with this Umore property, and in the audience today, Mayor Bill Drosty, City Administrator Logan Martin, and Community Development Director Kim Lindquist, I believe, were scheduled to be here today. If you can wave or just say hi, and thank you for being here. And from Newland Communities, our acquirer, Ted Nelson, the regional president, and Dave Newman, an advisor, is supposed to be here as well. Thank you for being here. But I would just say that the community is very supportive of this. It would be complementary to the development of Rosemount. I think it's going to take a couple of years, as you saw in the materials and due diligence and that type of thing. And we think this is a very good outcome and very much supported by the local community, and urge your approval.
Okay, thank you. Discussion, Regent Beeson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and presenters. I do want to echo the observation that City of Rosemount has been really a great partner from the first day that this vision was created, and it's started a year or two before I was on the board, but then staying with us as the plan and the world changed and the economy changed, and still an exciting plan. Having that amount of new construction housing on the site is a win-win for everybody. So this has been a really great partnership with the local community.
Thank you. Regent Powell.
Thanks, Chair Anderson. So I think that this question has been asked several other times before, so apologies to my colleagues, but it has to do with, as we monetize these sorts of things, which I think is a great strategy, and having someone else take ownership of this property who will have much better use for it. It's going to be $12 or $13 million sale. So I guess the question is, as we do that, what happens to those funds? I mean, in my simple little mind, this is a great opportunity for infusion of $13 million into unrestricted endowment, and that'll throw off $500,000 in cash, which helps the cause, here. But I guess it's more complicated than that. And so if someone could just tell me what happens with the funds from these kinds of.
I'm going to call on Senior Vice President Burnett, might be the most able to tell us that about finances.
So Regent Powell, the board acted back in 2009 for any net proceeds to Umore to go into a legacy account. So that will go where
excuse me, there's a question specific to Umore.
Yes. But we also have costs that we've been borne over the years with a deficit at Umore that some of the proceeds will be applied to. Secondly, there's a big turkey research facility just to the south of it and to the east of the mining area that is part of CFAN's academic piece that we're going to have to move to a different part of the state of Minnesota because it just can't be adjacent to this. So some of the work we're going to be doing while they're doing their due diligence is figuring out where that goes with the dean of CFAN's and the affected faculty. But net, when we're done, we'll report that back to the board, but it goes into the Umore Legacy Fund as directed by the Regents back in 2009.
That's a great question. Does that answer it? Regent Rocha.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And that's something that I'd would like to get more into because I'm still not kind of grasping the concept of the fact that we're covering these costs all this time, and then so who are we paying back when you're paying them back? But that since we were short on time and we have company here, I think I'll leave it for another conversation. But to that point, my initial point, Mr. Chair, was since they drove all the way up here, could we just hear briefly from the mayor or another city representative with respect to the project and how it relates to the city?
Welcome
He can sit right here.
Go ahead, Mayor.
Mr. Chair, Regents, good news, nothing prepared. But I would say I've been working with the University of Minnesota over a decade. It's a large parcel of land that affects our city. And to move it with over 60 years to development is a win-win for the region, the county, and the city.
Great.
So
Great to
thank
hear.
you.
Great to hear. Did that answer your question, Regent Rocha? And Senior Vice President Burnett, did you have anything to add to Regent Rocha's question?
So, Regent Rocha, the quick answer is prior to my arrival, decisions were made to make expenditures and a deficit account occurs. And then the UMOR account, I believe it's $5 million to the negative. So the first thing we need to do is zero that out and then cover these costs of the transaction and then go and follow the Regent directive on UMOR. We can have another offline conversation about real estate, but many of our accounts incur costs, particularly around UMOR, with respect to environmental issues and other things that were spent, and there was nowhere to pay for that at the time. So this will be where the first proceeds will go, is to cover that negative.
So in essence, that gets to Regent Powell's question too. It comes back to the university.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we are going to, Regent Beeson, I'm sorry.
Oh, thanks, Mr. Chair. I think if we look back at the resolution, the intent was that the net money, the profit money, if you will, would end up in a, it's described as a legacy fund, but it's really intended to be a scholarship fund. So it's not, the intent was not to use it for operating costs, but to create scholarships off of the earnings under that UMOR account. And I think the legislation also requires that we get an annual report on UMOR, and maybe this time around that would include the financial update.
Appreciate that. Regent Powell.
Just to clarify, I wasn't suggesting that we use all the proceeds for a one-time operating support. I mean, I think that scholarship fund, some sort of endowment makes sense. So I think there's some clarification.
Thank you. At this time, we're going to call the vote. All those in favor of the sale of 435 acres of UMOR Park signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Wonder if I can yes, I think I can let Vice President Burleson leave the table. And we're on to the consent report. Before I bring it up to Senior Vice President Burnett, Provost Hanson, do you have some of the people we may be employing here, or at least you want to introduce and say some things about them before we potentially bring them into employment at the University of Minnesota? And Crookston, if you want to get ready next? Okay, thank you.
Well, the one I'd like to draw to your attention is the appointment of Mustafa Kaveh to the deanship in College of Science and Engineering. The details about the appointment are in your consent report, and the appointment is subject to approval at today's board meeting. The appointment as dean would be for a fixed term from today to after you finish. Through June 30th, 2020, and then we'd have a national search which would launch in July 2020. Moss has served as interim dean since mid-January, and during that time I've talked extensively with collegiate and department leaders and external friends of the College of Science and Engineering, and they've expressed overwhelming support for and confidence in Moss's leadership. As dean, he'll continue to provide strategic and intellectual leadership and administrative oversight and accountability for the college. He'll play a major leadership role, as he already has been doing, in the ongoing capital campaign, and he's engaged in various ways, as he has been with various engineering councils, and he of course will have responsibility for the academic profile of the college nationally and internationally. Moss has served in various roles in the college for more than 40 years. He's most recently been Associate Dean for Research and Planning, and before that he was head of the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering for 15 years. So he's very experienced in the college. He has the full support internally and externally, and I bring it to you for confirmation of the decanal appointment.
Thank you. Thank you. I think before we vote, we'll also invite Chancellor Holzclaws from Crookston up. And I just want to remind you people that on Tuesday in your consent report, there was an addition to include agreement for the Vice Chancellor for Academic and Student Affairs on the Crookston campus. And so if you have any questions about that, we're going to be able to ask Chancellor Holzclaws after she tells us who the employee may be.
Thank you very much, Chair Anderson and members of the board. It's my honor to ask for your approval of the appointment of John Hoffman as Vice Chancellor for Academic and Student Affairs. Dr. Barbara Kyneth is going to be announcing her retirement in the next several months, and we did have a national search, and Dr. Hoffman was one of 3 candidates who was brought to campus. He comes to us from Cal State Fullerton, where he has been in a leadership role there. Prior to that, too, as you note on this appointment, it's both academic affairs and student affairs, and so he brings both a very strong academic background in that area in education leadership. As you note, both his master's and PhD are from the University of Minnesota, and so he brings both, I said, that area as well as with student affairs. He's held a number of positions over the last 20 years working in student affairs. So we felt very privileged that he has decided that he needs to come back to the Midwest. He's originally from the Midwest and would like to return to the Midwest. He's been in California for about 12 years, mostly with the Cal State system and also with some of the Concordia colleges there.
Appreciate that. I appreciate that. Before we let's get a motion on the table to accept the consent report, then we can have a discussion.
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. The consent report's on the table. Anybody have any questions of Provost Hanson or Chancellor Holzclaw or anything else in the consent report that you maybe could go to Senior Vice President Burnett? Regional Mari.
Yes, thank you, Chair Anderson. I'm actually looking at the CSC edition of the MRI suite, and in light of planning ahead, I'm wondering how we assessed or did not assess the potential on a 4 to 5 year old facility that we would need to spend an extra $2 million on a new MRI facility, and how we might be thinking about that as we look forward in planning, and if we had done this ahead of time, how much we potentially could have saved on that $2 million.
Do you have an answer to that?
I can give it a shot. Regional Mari and members of the committee, the request came from UMP. The University of Minnesota Physicians, as you may recall, is a joint venture owner of the CSC with Fairview Health System. They put 2 MRIs in the building, and they're very much one, add to the margins that they need for the institution or for the building, and they're oversubscribed. So they approached us about financing a 3rd MRI because of demand, and I believe that they're doing MRIs on weekends just to kind of keep up with the load. And so really it was a business decision, and they asked the university to provide the financing, and we felt it was a good business decision in our review, and we're working hard to help UMP and Fairview help the CSC as it's coming out of its startup phase to have the right infrastructure to be able to do the work it needs to do to support our clinical mission, but also look at the bottom line of the building. So it was clearly a business decision, and it was something that was unanticipated when they built it, but they see the demand for MRIs and increased payers pushing for non-hospital MRIs because of cost differentials. So there's a business strategy to it that we looked at, and we felt like it was a reasonable thing, and with the region threshold at $1 million, it requires the board's approval.
Just quick, I don't disagree with doing this. I think it's great that we are in high demand and that we need a 3rd MRI. I wonder if it was a miss in the anticipation of what we would need, and then therefore spending more than we might need to spend had we planned for it. Thank you.
I don't know if he has an answer, but it sounds like it's demand driven. Did Regent McMillan, did you have your hand up?
I'll support the consent agenda, including the recent additions with the personnel hires. And I just call out for the board's notice here with Vice President Bertelsen in the room and my former colleague on the Facilities Committee, Regent Emeritus Devine. The very last 5 pages of the consent report have what I think is getting closer to a facilities dashboard, that if you go back in time to our Facilities Committee, that was something that those of you that served on it was elusive for what we wanted and elusive for what you could provide, and that looks like it's beginning to get there. So just in the context of, again, appreciating the administration's work with us as a board, that may be something you talk about offline with in your leadership things, but I like what I see there, and I like the ability to get my arms around where our major builds are at, and in one glance. And maybe I don't know how often we provide it, but it's good progress. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions on the consent report? If not, we are now going to vote to approve the consent report, I guess. All those in favor of approving the consent report signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Information items, Senior Vice President Burnett, anything we need to know?
I think it's pretty self-explanatory, Mr. Chairman. We're happy to take any questions offline around anything that's in the information items, but there are quite a few reports in there that are board directives to the administration. We hope they find them responsive.
Any questions on anything else about the meeting today? Any questions? President Kaler.
Regent Anderson, I would call the committee's, Chair Anderson, thank you, committee's attention to page 222 of the docket material, which shows the healthcare cost trends for 4 years out of 5, with our actual U-plan trend being below the national trends, which is a testament to pretty skillful management of our healthcare plan and an important part of controlling our costs.
Terrific. Thank you very much. And I know there's a lot in there about that kind of stuff, so it's good to read it. With that, I'm going to call for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second? All in favor? Opposed? Adjourned.
Nice to meet you.